And last question. The agenda has been updated, and the last session of roundtable and debate will cover both past experiences and future programming of structural funds. So the events, hopefully, if we all are in time, will be finishing at 12:30. Okay, so without more delay on my part, on my side, I'm really happy to give the floor and to welcome Teresa Riesgo. She is the Secretary General for Innovation from Spain, and Marcela Livkova, they will, both of them, they will do the opening. So please, Teresa, the floor is yours anytime you want.
Thank you very much, Zulema, and good morning, everybody on the other side of the screen. I thank you very, very much for counting on me for this opening on this very interesting mutual learning or workshop, or as you can call it anyhow. I think this is a very relevant and a very precise time to talk about this, how these structural funds, European structural funds, can and will and should and must be used for gender equality in research and innovation, because this is now the time. Yeah. So as I think today we will have the opportunity to have an interesting discussion, and also to see how these funds that are so important in Europe, and particularly in some countries, and particularly if I can talk about Spain, that you see here where I am, how these funds can at the end change the society. Although today it will be mainly covered to research, innovation, and gender issues. Another thing is that this year and this moment is very relevant because um, uh, these funds, in combination with the recovery, uh, transformation, and resilience funds that Europe is putting on the table, are also a very powerful tool to change, to have this idea of the next generation of Europeans that we have to build. Yeah, so it's in our hands to build it in equal way, in a fair way, and this is part of also of the aim of this workshop today. In these structural funds, these European social funds and European regional development funds in Spain have been used for many years since our entrance in the 80s in the European Union, for many things. And the transformation of the country, thanks to these funds, has been, I say, very relevant. And if you, if I think this is something that is happening in many other countries. Particularly in research and innovation, in this ministry, we are using these funds for particularly for research infrastructures, for research projects, research and innovation projects, both in basic research, but also many times in innovation based research, based projects, but also in, for example, in public procurement of innovation, which is another important issue, and of course in human resources. Um, I think, I mean, I'm talking about the European Social Fund. Yeah, I think this what is very important here is that gender issues must be considered and committed in all the applications and all the uses of these funds, not only in the human resources, that is quite evident, yeah, but we have to find um, a way of putting the resources where when the gender equality is assured, and also all the things that now Europe is getting putting on the table as the do not harm issues, do not significantly harm is how it is called, which is another very important topic and a very important concept in our world, in our future, which is the aim of at the end of this type of funds. So I hope today you will find answers to many questions that are on the table, and also to underline that this is the moment, and this is the moment to do it. So I wish you all a very good morning, and I hope that this workshop would be very fruitful, and I will be very glad to read the conclusions and to listen to your discussion. So thank you, Thuliam, again for counting on me, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for your words. And now the floor is Marcela. Marcela Linkova, please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Zulema, for giving me the floor. It's really a great pleasure to be here today, and it's only with the greatest regret that we cannot be in Madrid, because this is what we had originally planned. We started planning this workshop really a long time ago, before the lockdown last year, and this is where we are. And so I'm really glad to see you all here online with us today. I really want to thank my Spanish colleagues, Zulema and her team, for organizing this very important and timely workshop on a topic that hopefully will help us contribute to building resilience and overcome the impact of COVID, including the negative gendered impacts that we're all battling. I also really want to thank Teresa Riesgo for joining us and introducing this workshop. Thank you so much for being here. And so with this, I would just like to share my screen and give you a few words about Gender Action, which is the project behind this initiative. So Gender Action was launched in April 2017 as an innovative policy community. And our aim is to mainstream gender in research and innovation policies in the European Union, coordinate the advice on gender equality policy in research and innovation in the EU, across or on the interface between the member states and the Commission and other stakeholders, build capacity to foster gender equality in research and innovation, and network across the EU and beyond. And so we bring together representatives that are appointed by national authorities in member states and associated countries, many of whom are members of the Standing Working Group on Gender in Research and Innovation. So this is some of the technical information about the project, giving you the call under which we are funded in Horizon 2020. You can see that we are coming to an end in September. We have asked for an extension to allow us to continue some of the very important work. And we have 14 partners from 13 countries and 3 associate partners in the project. So I just would like to share a few words about the main achievements, because we are already taking stock slowly as we are nearing the end. So very important on our agenda was the agenda setting approach and policy outreach. And we have succeeded in becoming one of the main advocates for gender equality in European research and innovation policy, with more than 50 specific recommendations aimed at mainstreaming gender in the European research area.
E innovación europea, con más de 50 recomendaciones específicas destinadas a transversalizar el género en el área de investigación europea y Horizon Europe. Quiero agradecer a nuestros colegas, sobre todo, por el trabajo que han realizado.
Vital role that the Spanish Ministry and colleagues at FESIS have played, and I really want to commend this work very highly. The second aspect that we have concentrated on in the project is policy evaluation, which is led by our colleagues in Austria. And here we have identified the core elements that go into ensuring robust process of policymaking on gender equality in the European research area. We have also shown how important it is to vigorously monitor and evaluate policy implementation and develop appropriate indicators. And we have also shown that some of the indicators that we are now using to evaluate progress on the gender equality objective in the European research area is not appropriate. And in connection with this effort, we have also contributed to a better understanding of the differences between the EU 27 member states, both older and newer, smaller and large. Large part of our activities has also been mutual learning and exchange, as well as capacity building. This is one of the opportunities to do this. And so the capacity building and mutual learning actions have been really an excellent tool for sharing knowledge amongst ourselves, increasing the professionalization of the work in our network, learning from each other in a collegial and supportive spirit, and raising awareness among more than 500 people who are working in various fields of research and innovation. Now to why we're meeting today for this workshop. One important thing that we think that we need to advance on is really to learn about how the European Social Fund and the European Regional Development Fund can contribute to promoting gender equality specifically in research and innovation, and share experience about how this is done in the member states. Secondly, we want to share experience about the gender equality concerns being embedded in these programs in the previous program period and what the member states have achieved. We also want to facilitate policy exchange on mainstreaming gender in the funds, with a particular attention to the impact of COVID-19 and how member states have used and will be using ESF and ERDF to build resilience and overcome the impact of COVID. And lastly, feed the development of a policy brief on the strategic advice for the integration of gender in the content of and evaluation of the funds that will be coming out of this mutual learning workshop. And so I really look forward to the discussions and exchanges that we have. I'm certain that we will learn a lot from the experience gained in the previous program period in the various member states that will be contributing. Here is just the contact information. You can also follow us on Twitter, and we have a YouTube channel. And with this is all from my side. Thank you very much, and I wish us all an excellent workshop today.
Thank you so much, Marcela, and thank you, Teresa. Thank you both for your opening and for your introductory words and the framework. Marcela, as Gender Action Coordinator, she's also the president of the Standing Working Group of Gender Research and Innovation, as you might know. I'm just sure, for sure you know. So now we can move ahead in the agenda, and I would like to introduce to Silvia Alvarez. I will just give some brief introduction to her profile, her bio. She is program manager in the Directorate General for Regional and Urban Policies. She will be covering the part on what are the ESF and the ER development funds, and what are the connections with research and innovation. Silvia Alvarez Santos, she has almost 20 years of experience in the field of research and innovation, SMS, and regional matters. The last 13 years, Silvia has been working at the European Commission. She's now a program manager at Regio Unit G.2, Portugal and Spain, as she's responsible for the European Regional Development Fund's National Operational Program for Spain, called POP. She's also thematically responsible for smart growth and smart specialization strategies in Spain. Before joining DG Regio, Silvia managed FP7, Horizon 2020, and COSME grants at DG RTD, the European Research Council, the executive agency for small and medium-sized enterprise, and the CESAR joint undertaking. She has also experience in regional matters from the European Committee of the Regions and the Regional Government of Galicia. Today, Silvia will give us an overview of what are the European Social Funds and the European Regional Development Funds, and what their connection with research and innovation. Thank you, Silvia, for accepting our invitation. And now the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suleiman. Thank you to everybody, and also based on behalf of the Euregio and on the Unit G2, Spain and Portugal, I would like to thank you for this invitation. It's a honor and a privilege to be here today with you on this topic, which is not only very important, but also very relevant and in a very timely manner, as was just expressed in the introductory words. So as already said, I will give an overview of the structural funds, but I will concentrate on the ERDF and specifically on the thematic objective for smart growth, which is where we have the link with research and innovation. So if we can, I think you need to pass this presentation, the next slide, yes. So just to give you, a broad overview on the context for the next programming period, or almost the current one that we are already in 21-27. We have, the structural and investment funds originally were meant to be 7, then there was also the GTF that was added. So we have 9 funds which are covered with a single set of rules, which are the common provision regulations. That this helps to have all these funds more coherent and more easy to combine. And among all these funds, we have the ERDF for regional development. This is what we manage here in the G-Regio. Cohesion Fund also managed in the G-Regio. The ESF Plus, the European Social Fund Plus, that, as you know, is DG Employment, and where it's also, chef de file, as we used to say here in our jargon, for gender equality issues. And in addition, we have also other funds like the MFF, the Maritime and Fisheries Funds, and funds related with the home, DG Home, more with the integration of migrants and for example, the Internal Security Fund, Asylum, etc. So here, for the purpose of today, for us, we are going to concentrate on what we call cohesion policy, which are the ERDF, Cohesion Fund, and ESF Plus. So perhaps we can go to the next slide, please. What do we want for the next period? In broad terms, for cohesion policy. We want, to focus the investment of cohesion policy on the transition to a smart and to a low carbon economy that will respond to the challenges and the political agenda of the Green Deal, of the twin transition, of a more digital society, and also responding to the new industrial strategy. There will be a stronger condition and links to the European semester. I will enter into more details in the coming slides. I'm just giving a very short overview. So this will come, as we will see a bit later on the neighboring conditions. We will also hope to have, the data more comprehensive and real-time and accessible for the public. And as I said, these 8 funds and 1 regulation will help to have more flexibility, to have more simplified procedures. If, for example, we want to transfer, or member states want to transfer funds from one to the other. As you know, cohesion policy is under shared management and also has, a different way of conception. For example, as opposed to a Horizon program, is based on what we call the Belling method, based on the GDP per capita, on the wealth of the member states. And if we perhaps can already go to the next slide, we can see, how this will be distributed, per wealth of regions. So we have basically 3 categories of regions, and we have, for those in red, are the less developed regions, and they will receive financing of up to 85% of EU funds for the projects. The kind of orange regions, they are between 75 and 100% of GDP, then they would receive a 60% of co-funding, and the less, let's say that the kind of yellow or lighter orange, they will, are the more developed, and they will receive a 40% of co-funding. This is, there are more details depending if, for example, the region was before in transition region, now is more developed, then they have a different rates, but this is overall, the map that we will use for the eligibility of co-funding. If we go, please, to the next here. Okay, so I gave you very broadly, the main lines on the twin transition, as we would call it nowadays. But now when we go into policy objectives, the ESF and ERDF are responding to 5 policy objectives. In the current period, 14-20, there are 11 objectives that now are consolidated into 5. The first one is as we call PO1, Policy Objective 1, is Smarter Europe through the innovation, smart and economic transformation. This is where is the right title link with research and innovation, and where I will focus a bit later in the coming slides. I'm going to enter into the specific objectives and what can be funded over there. But just to give you an overview, then we have on the second policy objective is dealing with the Green Deal, the greener low carbon Europe, where includes, for example, action related to energy efficiency, energy transition, circular economy, climate adaptation, risk mitigation. Then on the three policy objective 3 is a more connected Europe. So this is about mobility and ICT connectivity. Then on the 4, policy objective 4, this is ESF plus, basically. This is a more social Europe, implementing the European pillar of social rights. So all the 3 above that I mentioned are pretty much ERDF, and ESF plus is more on the 4, on the implementing pillar of social rights. And then on the last one, we have a Europe closer to citizens. So there will be activities linked to the sustainable development of rural, urban, coastal areas, local initiatives. So this is a bit, I mean, in a nutshell, what are the policy objectives? Then we have also some horizontal objectives like the administrative capacity building that will be reinforced, and also cooperation between regions, across regions. So if we go to the next one, the next slide, please. I would like here just to give you, just to explain very briefly what is thematic concentration about, just for you to have an idea that the vast majority of funds will be concentrated on PO1, so Smart Europe, and PO2, Green Europe. So, I mean, concentration is about, I mean, depending on the GNI per head of a member state, there will be a percentage of the funds that will have to be concentrated in certain policy objectives. So here you see that for those regions, countries that have a higher GNI per capita, then the 85% of resources will have to go for PO1 and PO2. Then in regions between 75 and 100 will be 40%, and for regions around below 75, 25. But bear in mind that those regions where they would receive 25% of 40% of thematic concentration, they most likely will have a higher rate of co-funding. So, I mean, just to summarize here is that there will be still a lot of money dedicated for research and innovation for policy objective 1 in the coming period. This is what I wanted basically to highlight with this slide. So if we go, please, on the next one. Now I want to talk on the enabling conditions, because as part of the programming process, this is, I mean, enabling conditions are what in the current period were ex-ante conditions. Perhaps you are a bit familiar with them. And for investments related to research and innovations funded by ERDF, the condition for the 14-20 period was to develop a smart specialization strategy, which is conceived as a strategy that, I mean, like an umbrella strategy for the economic development of the region, taking into account, for example, I will again elaborate a bit further, questions, for example, like the ETP, the entrepreneurial development process, has to be a governance system, it has to be a monitoring. So this was during the 14-20 period. Now for the 21-27 period, the Commission is asking as preconditions for the payment, for the reimbursement of costs related to research and innovation, that the regions need to have the fulfillment of the smart specialization strategy. So we want to push a bit further the implementation of the smart specialization strategy to be at the core of our investments. But perhaps if we go into the next slide, because it's a bit, I hope to explain it properly, because I understand that perhaps for people who are not inside this is not always so easy. So the policy objective 1 has 5 specific objectives. This is what we have here. We have policy objective 1.1 is enhancing research and innovation capacities in the uptake of advanced technologies. What is funded is going to be funded under this thematic objective. So here you have quite a lot of, I mean, of activities of innovation from TRL to above. So what we are not funding is basic fundamental research. We fund applied research and innovation. And what the Commission is I mean, the ERDF wants, I mean, the past were especially a lot of investments done for large infrastructure projects for research and innovation. Now the idea is not to go into that direction, but rather to use already the infrastructure that are already there and to build them. So then, I mean, the activities are quite broad, or as long as they are from TRL to above. So there you can cover activities to foster cooperation, business and enterprises, universities, for example, living labs, public procurement, innovative public procurement, just to give a few examples, but really it's quite broad as a subject. As I said, the condition is that it has to be linked to a smart specialization strategy. So what you see here in an orange on the left, a specific objective 1.1 and 1.4, this is a strict interpretation. You have to have a smart specialization strategy to be eligible for funding. So all the activities, all the investments need to be covered by the priority areas of this smart specialization strategy. Then on the 1.2, the digitalization, there is a more flexible interpretation. So then you can have, you can find the activities for the digitalization of companies, for example, even if those companies are not strictly linked to the smart specialization strategy. This is a flexible approach. Then on the 1.3 is similar for the growth and competitiveness of SMEs. There typically you have, for example, activities of internationalization of SMEs, for example, and then you can cover topics or areas which are beyond the smart specialization strategy. And now we go to the 1.4, which is also in yellow, which means that also here we have a narrowed approach. This is a new one, thematic, this new specific objective, which is skills related for the smart specialization, for the industrial transitions, and for the entrepreneurship. And you may wonder, but well, we are also financing skills through the ESF. So the demarcation basically is that if you have general skills, let's say more horizontal skills, this is the ESF plus. So we are not entering here in areas which are covered already for skills under the ESF. Here is very specific, is for the smart specialization strategies. So imagine, for example, that a certain region has a weakness, for example, for skills for leaders of clusters or managers, or for certain typology of leader that cannot, for example, have a problem for new skills for innovation, for adaptation to twin transition, for digitalization. All these things, these skills that can be covered related to the smart specialization can be covered here under this specific objective. Again, I mean, there is small details. I need to see a bit of a case by case, but quite a lot of activities can be covered. Also promoting links between, for example, university, SMEs, fostering, for example, the networking, all these kind of activities most likely can be also be covered here. And the new one that I mentioned here in red, 1.5, is broadband. Originally, that was in another policy objective, but it was switched to policy objective 1 at the latest in agreement at the council last December. It has another specific enabling condition. So even if it is under PO1, this is already, it's not that related to research and innovation. So if you have questions, so I'm not very clear, and then at the end, I'm happy to go back here if you have any questions. So if you go on the next one, here now we'll see the link of the enabling condition. When I said that we are strict and enabling condition needs to be fulfilled for the reimbursements of activities covered under specific objective 1.1 and 1.4, what do we mean by the enabling condition? So according to the regulation, actually the name is the good governance of the enabling condition, because they are meant to be created in the previous period. And there are several criteria, which are the ones mentioned here. I will go through them very quickly because I think if it went into the details, we could stay already the whole morning discussing about it. But it's quite demanding. We want, before, approving or the payments and this, but this is a strategy behind this for the smart specialization strategies. So there will be an analysis of the challenges and bottlenecks of innovation diffusion and digitalization. What are especially with innovation diffusion, which is the emphasis here for research under the ERDF. And if there are, for these bottlenecks, which kind of activities are envisaged to carry out to overcome those challenges, that there will be a competent body that is responsible for the governance of the smart specialization strategy, that this body can take decisions throughout the period and adapt in case emergencies or things change. There is also a monitoring and evaluation tool to monitor also the performance toward the objectives of the strategy. The EDP is at the core of everything. This is, the functioning for the stakeholder cooperation. Here, this is a quadruple LEC approach. So we want the public administration, universities, SMEs, and industry, but also civil society to be involved in the functioning of the smart specialization strategies. On the five is the link with the European semester that I mentioned at the very beginning. These are is quite general when you read it. Action necessary to improve national, regional research and innovation system. But in reality, this is what is being done to answer the country recommendations of the European semester related to research and innovation. The sixth, if it is relevant, actions to support industrial transition, especially on those areas which are most affected by it, like for example, Industry 4.0, upskilling, reskilling. And the last one is the measures for enhancing cooperation with partners outside a region or a given member state in the priority areas of the smart specialization strategy. So all this doesn't need to be, let's say, with all the actions fulfilled before the improvement of the enabling condition, but there should be like a sound, let's say, roadmap and a clear vision throughout the programming period, and it's something that will be monitoring throughout the period. So it's not a checkbox that at the beginning we just said, okay, this is fine, now we can release the funds for 7 years. Now we do this, there will be a monitoring gradually of this. So if we go on the next slide, please. This is basically summarizing, perhaps a bit more visually friendly, what I just said in the previous one. So here you have on the left, the smart specialization as an enabling condition with the 7 criteria. EDP is at the core. Then the scope of the activities is applied research. So TRL 2 and above for innovation and including industrial research, experimental development, studies, etc. And then the 2 specific objectives, 1.1, 1.4, which I just mentioned. So perhaps we can go to the next one. Here, I wanted to briefly mention this, the inter-regional innovation investment, because it's also something new. What I was explaining so far were under shared management. So typically the ERDF funds, which are, co-managed together with a member state of a region. But also this year, or this programming period, there will be a part of ERDF funds that will be under direct management for supporting the interregional innovation investment. So basically it's a new type of cooperation in direct management, linking the smart specialization strategies in different regions. So this is more towards the latest stage of TRL, more towards the commercialization and scaling up of interregional innovation projects that have the potential to develop in the European value chain. The implementation is delegated to executive agency. I put there the links in case you want to further check afterwards. And this is also closely linked with the GRC thematic platforms that perhaps you are aware of. Is a project that is led by the Joint Research Center in Seville, but where the European Commission, the RTD, Regio, GROW, Connect participate as well. And then they have platform on thematic areas, for example, on energy, batteries, with partners from several regions. So this is in indirect management, as I was saying, and I just to give you an overview, since this is about research and innovation support by the ERDF, I wanted to highlight this to you as well. And perhaps I haven't said, now that I read the GRC, that I forgot to mention before when I explained the enabling conditions, just to say also that in the process, okay, Regio is, as we say here, shut the field, so we are leading this process, but we are supported by the GRTD and the Joint Research Center. So they are also part of our, let's say, internal assessment process. So when the member state and the regions, they submit to us the plans for the smart specialization strategies, they are checked internally also by the GRTD and the Joint Research Center. So I just forgot and realized now. So perhaps we can go to the next one, which I think is about synergies, especially because I mentioned that, I mean, that this direct scheme for direct management is delegated in an agency, and actually it's in the agency that also deals with the, how you call the European Innovation Council now, which is the SME instrument in the past, in the COSME project. So it will be definitely easier for synergies, but also under shared management, there is potential of combining ERDF and Horizon Europe, and already a case that perhaps some of you are aware of is the Seal of Excellence. So the use of ERDF funding for projects that are on the reserve list of Horizon 2020 or Europe in future, Horizon Europe projects. Normally they have the advantage that I mean, you don't have to do, I mean, the member state of the region doesn't need to do an evaluation, so they already have a label granting that they are excellent projects, but they will be submitted to the rules of the ERDF. And there is also a revision at the moment of the GBR, I mean, the state aid, because this is subject to state aid rules that facilitate these synergies. Another one is the support to partnerships, where the ERDF can be used as a member state contribution in Horizon Europe partnerships. This will be something for this upcoming period. And also the transfer possibility that also member states can transfer up to 5% of the funding to other programs. I mean, I here I concentrate, of course, with Horizon Europe for the purpose of this workshop, but this works also for other funding. It's quite general. But for in research and innovation, I mean, the idea is that Horizon Europe will provide European excellence, while ERDF is the regional relevance. We come here with this territorial place-based approach of a smart specialization, customized to the specificities of a region, of an area, and more linked to innovation diffusion, more linked to the SMEs because of the generation of employment. This is a bit, let's say, broadly speaking, the perspective coming from region. So in the next slide, I think I have a slide basically, I mean, simplifying what is Horizon Europe and our policy objective 1. So in the end, I mean, it's looking at the potential of research and innovation in a complementarity way already, because through ERDF is the support to enhancing the capacities. Then in Horizon, you have the support of the excellence. So that was more, I mean, like a summary of what I have already been saying. Perhaps we can go to next one if we want to have some time for questions. Here I just have a couple of last slides about the process, about you know that for the programming period, there are at least two events which are key. One is the partnership agreement and the other one are the actual programs. So the partnership agreement is setting out the objectives and arrangement for using the structural funds, all of them at the beginning of the period. So not only RDA, but also ESF, MFF, and also the funds linked to cohesion, to the home. I mean, what I was saying before about migration, asylum, etc. So here it comes, let's say, I mean, the overall, I mean, arrangements and objectives that the member states want to have, and for the use of the structural fund, there will be already the policy objectives. Also, what I was explaining about demarcation of funding and instruments, and it has to be already set up already at the level of the partnership agreement. There will be a preliminary financial allocation per financial objective. Okay, I mean, it's quite detailed, but once here it arrives, it goes into an internal consultation process with all the DGs involved. Yeah, so this is, let's say, a first step. And the second one, if we just go, I mean, is the programs, the actual programs that you, I guess, are a bit familiar with. Is the next slide, please? are the programs, which are then is, they can be at regional level or a national level, and they summary the main development challenges and strategy for contributing to the policy objectives, with a justification for selection of policy objectives and specific objectives. So here is where you will have to indicate what you want to finance, for example, in a specific objective SO1 for a certain region or SO3, and this is what is going to be linked to this smart specialization strategy that I was referring to. Which priorities you will have to explain the intervention logic, the description of the specific objective, actions, operations for strategic importance. This is basically the strategic, the intervention logic that you will have to explain, together with a financing plan, a communication plan, etc. So this is, I tried to be a bit synthetic because I didn't have much time. I wanted to just to give an overview and leave time for questions in case you have anything that you want to clarify now, or if questions come afterwards. I think in the very last slide, I think, here there are some links where you can dig in. Perhaps interesting also for you, if you are not aware of, is this second link on the Open Data platform. There you can filter by keyword and by country, by thematic, policy objective projects, for example, or the amount of funding that is committed or that is spent. The data is quite regularly updated. So I invite you to use it as a resource if you want to know what is being financed, for example, in a certain topic or in a certain region or member state. And also some project examples as well that you have. You can look then in the third link there. And then it comes to the very last one, where you have also my contact details. Should you have any other information that is not addressed here, if I'm not responsible for it, I will search for it. So I remain available for anything that can be of support to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Silvia. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, from providing this great overview on how these regional development funds are working in connection to other funding. And now we have maybe 2-3 minutes for questions. And if, is there anyone who wants to ask something? There's nothing in the chat for the moment, but any question for Silvia? If not, I will have one. Or maybe two. The first one is there any, because you were talking about regulation, the programming, and the reporting, and the monitoring, is there any request or any recommendation in connection to gender equality, or how to mainstream gender in the programming, or the strategy, the smart strategies that they are developing at regional level? Because I remember in the case of the Women in Science Union, I was invited, and I think it's very good practice, and I think they are here with us today from Cantabria. They are now in the process of developing their smart strategy, and they were asking me for training, for supporting some training in how to integrate gender equality in that strategy. And I think that is very good practice. But I would like to ask you if there is some kind of recommendation on that, or maybe it was on like a proactive way, or is anything coming from the European Commission on for these European regional development funds on that respect?
Sorry, if I understand correctly, the example of Cantabria was in the context of the smart specialization strategies?
Exactly.
Okay.
And I was very, probably they will, at the end of the session of today's, I will ask them to just, if they're here, because I think Marta Kazuko was here, and I would love for them to share at the end of today this good practice. But the question coming from that good practice is that if there is something in DG Regio connection, or maybe like requirement or a recommendation on how to mainstream gender equality in the implementation of this funding.
Well, I mean, first of all, as you know, I'm not an expert in gender issues, and as you know, I try to have on board colleagues who are, acknowledgement on the subject. But I did have a chat with them, and I'm not perhaps able to to answer on this fully on the gender mainstreaming, but I'm glad to come back on this if I discuss internally. What I can tell you on the DG region, we are aligning with DG employment because they are the chef de file. So basically what you know already from DG employment, from other seminars, I understand that I think in the context of the European Week of Regions and Cities, it was already addressed in a workshop for future programming periods. So this, we are completely aligning with them on this. Now, if I can, see that more from the perspective of research and innovation, and I'm saying more on a, let's say, my experience. I'm not saying that this is going to be on a region position at all on this, but the problem with gender in research and innovation is that at least in the past, a lot of money was for big infrastructures, not for a target group, as opposed, for example, for the employment, training courses, for example. So, how do you use integrating gender streaming there is very difficult. But I wanted to highlight to you that perhaps it's an option that to explore under this specific objective 1.4 that I was mentioning before, the skills for smart specialization, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So this is perhaps, if in a certain region they identify that they have a weakness for, I don't know, they don't have women, that they have a problem to integrate women as leaders in cluster managers, or I don't know, in leading SMEs companies, lead them towards innovation. I think that there is a need intervention logic. I think that this could be explored, this possibility to integrate specifically under the 1.4. But this is, as I said, is the way I see this is not an official position. And I think it's something that could be, explored in the context of a specific context. If there is a program, we did it also in other contexts. That, for example, we are exploring, actually came from Spain for the EDP, which activities can be explored. We have a specific case of a region that wants to develop an EDP program, and they submitted to us a specific program to see whether it will be eligible for funding or not. And then we check internally with the colleagues with an official question and answer. So this is something that can be explored if it can be of help, because it's something
y que se pueden integrar a la transversalidad de género.
Ourselves also, we are trying to understand the full possibilities of this provision of skills for smart specialization. And I think there could be potential. This is how I see this linked to research and innovation.
Okay. Thank you so much. And another question is, I would like to ask you, because of this current situation that we have, is there any way that COVID has affected the program in 2021-2027? And another question connected to this one, because of the current situation, is there any synergy between next generation support to the European Regional Development Funds and European Social Funds you can foresee?
Yeah, but I'm laughing because I don't know if this question is more for the European Commission or more for the member states.
Probably.
Especially the last one.
Yeah, that's true.
No, COVID indeed. There has been an impact. But if I understand your question, you want to know more. What you said, it has an impact. Is more on the delay of the programming.
Yeah.
Look, also the new rules, are not still officially published. So did you know how there has been an effect of COVID? In the meantime, we have had a CRI and CRI plus reprogramming because extent of funds that were uncommitted in the current programming period were recommitted for the purpose of sanitary health. And these were, on the case-by-case basis, depending on what was available and not committed in a certain region. So there has been indeed an impact on that. Perhaps there were less funds. I know in the case of Spain that I'm following, some regions that they had still not all the funds committed in the PO1, that they were recommitted for the emergency of this moment, and that was the sanitary health. But it happens across Europe, everywhere. Then with the reprogramming, again, even if we don't have the final, the published rules, we already have a political agreement, which is pretty much final. Now we are on the stages of more of translation and fine tuning. So some member states are more advanced. We already have some cases where we have a draft partnership agreement, draft programs. In some others, they are perhaps busier with other things and it's coming later. is to be seen on a case-by-case basis. So in any case, we are from here, we want to, I mean, not to delay that much, but we are aware also that we have RRF in between. And we are also, involved on this process. Although regional shared field is the separate gen, but we are consultant. And for example, for the components we research and innovation, we also check the complementarities. We see that perhaps there will be things that will come and will be, if it's not clear to us, we will ask the managing authorities about it, but it's basically up to the member state to decide where you want to invest the money. In our case, we check that this is eligible, that there will be no double funding. I think that the member state is the first one interested in not having double funding, and we are convinced that, I mean, there are also checks done on that level. So it's difficult to say from our position, because we are perhaps in a situation where we would like to know more about complementarities, but we still don't have this information because this is in the making at the member state level. This is a bit, that's why I was a bit laughing when you asked me the question.
It's up to us then.
Yeah. No, but I mean,
to the regions, yeah.
There is a lot of, perhaps there is also an interest in delaying a bit the programming and having using RRF. But I mean, one thing is to go with the other. I think there should be a strategic plan from the beginning, also taking into account all the money available from different sources and with a strategic framework. And this is what is more difficult to do, but this is the way it has to be done. And the fact of having all these, big funds on the table now should not prevent to move ahead with the partnership agreement and the programs. One thing should be, in parallel with the other and in a complementary way. This is how we see it. But we are, as I said, at the disposal of member states when they submitted this to us.
Thank you so much, Silvia. Thank you so much for your answers. And now, without more delay, I will go on the agenda to introduce Elena Morais. And she will be talking about how the European Social Funds, European Regional Development Funds, operational programs have mainstream gender and gender equality plans. I will just briefly introduce her bio, her CV. She's gender mainstreaming researcher at the European Institute for Gender Equality. She's a researcher on gender mainstreaming. And before joining in 2015, Elena worked as a gender expert for the Spanish Agency for Development Cooperation, several international NGOs, and also served as consultant for UN Women. Elena now is managing EIGE's work on gender budgeting and gender responsive public procurement. EIGE research has looked into the cohesion policy with the aim of supporting more effective and sustainable design and implementation of gender mainstreaming. So now Elena will talk about how the European Social Funds, European Regional Development Funds, operational programs have mainstream gender and gender equality programs. Elena, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Zulema. Thank you, Marcela, as well, and Spanish authorities. It's a pleasure. It's a real pleasure for me to be here with you today. And we at EIGE, we are very glad that you have counted on us and invited us for this meeting. Muy buenos días. Un placer estar aquí con todas ustedes y todos ustedes.
Good morning to all of you. It's a pleasure to be with you here today.
Share my screen so that you can have access to very few slides I have prepared. Just a second. Okay, here we are. So today I'm briefly in my presentation, I'm briefly going to introduce key findings of our research on gender mainstreaming into the European Structural and Investment Funds 2014-2020 period. And then I will move into presenting the novelties that the 21-27 period offers. Then I will refer to tools that are available and provide some examples on good practices to mainstream gender into the next round of funds. Finally, I will make a brief references to other policy areas beyond the cohesion policy and other tools such as gender equality plans And finally, I will conclude with very few recommendations on how to move forward. So we all know that the EU funds play a key role on promoting gender equality and advanced gender equality in the European Union. As for other policy areas, but specifically for gender equality in all member states, they have been a strong support to move the gender equality policy, national gender equality policy framework and agendas forward. But what's the state of play when we look more in depth into operational programs and partnership agreements, of course, and then more in depth operational programs. So EGE conducted a research, a gender assessment in 11 member states. We did not go we were not able to cover the 28 member states by that time. We focus on 11, so we consider Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Italy, Portugal, Spain, and Sweden in our research. And we analyze the dual approach, or how the dual approach to gender equality is or has been implemented in the current period of the structural funds. Before I present the findings, I want to talk a little bit about the dual approach for gender equality. So this is the approach that not only the European Commission, but also at the international level, and then most member states have endorsed as the better strategy or the best strategy to implement the gender equality policy. And it means that beyond having specific actions on gender equality, there is also the requirement to mainstream gender into all steps of a policy or of a program, starting from the identification of such a policy or program until the evaluation, until the last phase. And this applies to all policy areas, to all programs and projects. So we looked then at how in a practical way, how the dual approach has been implemented. And we found that for all the funds, and maybe we can say that indeed we can look and have a separate section on the specificities of the ESF, but in general, for all the funds that were covered by the previous regulation, so 5 funds, gender mainstreaming and references to gender equality are often highlighted only in the chapter of horizontal themes, but then the references to gender equality have very, very few impact in the content of specific programs. So it remains often at the level of the rhetoric, and then we do not see how this specific content on gender equality is translated into the design and implementation of the programs. This means that information about the gender gaps and gender inequalities along means of addressing these gaps is largely missing. So no specific actions then identified within the operational programs. And this translates into the lack of gender-specific targets and lack of specific gender indicators missing from many operational programs. It even goes beyond, it even goes at the lack of sex disaggregated data, which, as we know, it's a requirement only for the ESF. For the other, for the rest of funds, this was not a requirement. And data, having disaggregated data, which shows the specific situations of women and men in all their diversity. So considering also their different groups and so on in society, is the key, is the basics for then moving on into the implementation of any gender equality analysis or mainstream or other tools to mainstream gender. And all these 4 elements I just mentioned, then they translate into the lack of reporting on gender equality. There is very few information in terms of what programs have achieved to close gender gaps and and reduce gender inequalities, and at national level. But then if we look at the aggregated level, so at the annual implementation reports of the Commission, there is even no reference to gender equality as such. There is a general section on horizontal themes where Commission reports to the Parliament and to the Council brief general information on how the horizontal themes and specific activities that member states have implemented on horizontal themes, such as capacity building, technical assistance, or so on. But as I said, no single reference to gender equality. When it comes to the final step, the evaluation, so then we see that most of the evaluations conducted provide very little information on gender equality, and there has been very few dedicated evaluations on gender equality conducted and implemented. In our research, we also look at financial allocations. We also assess the 2014-2020 structural funds allocations for gender equality. And there, one of the things we found was that the dual approach to gender equality, so the strategy I referred before, gender mainstreaming and specific actions, it's disappearing, and it's disappearing if we compare with previous programming periods. For 2014-2020, out of the 11 thematic objectives, which, as we have here just from Sandra, that then in the next period would be merged into 5. But out of the 11 thematic objectives that were in place in 2014-2020 period, there was no single objective on gender equality. And there were only 2 priorities related to gender equality. So there was also a lack of an institutionalized process to monitor the implementation of gender mainstreaming. So in reality, in practice, not in reality, but in practice, the dual approach to gender equality is in a way becoming bluer and bluer, is disappearing. We found difficulties to track funding allocations for gender equality. There is no specific information on gender equality in the overall budget. And also, when we look at specific measures to advance gender equality throughout the programming cycle, the same as well. It's very, very difficult to see specific expenditures for gender mainstreaming and gender equality highlighted and identified. And all this leads to what we call gender blind funding. So given the lack of these specific requirements to implement gender mainstreaming, that would then ensure indeed that the finding is gender sensitive. The reality is that we are in an opposite scenario. So even when we look at estimations of expenditure that were made public by the Commission in its former strategic enrichment for gender equality, there was a commitment of around 1% of the total ESF 2014-2020 budget to be allocated to gender equality. This was approximately about 0.6% of all the budget for the ERDF, and 5.3% or 3%, sorry, of the budget for the ESF. So what's next? Those were a brief description of findings of 2014-2020 period. But what's next? We are in a momentum of change, and we are impacted by economic and, of course, sanitary health and economic crisis situation. And what we see that under the Common Provision Regulations of 2017, EU funds that well, Sandra just went in depth into them, so I will only focus on the specific provision for gender equality here. So gender equality continues to be a horizontal principle, but we see a step back. And why? Because it's an horizontal principle that now it's merged with other grounds of inequalities and horizontal priorities. In the previous regulation, it was at least it was not, as I said, there was no thematic objective of gender equality, but it was a horizontal principle and standalone horizontal principle. For 21-27, it's part of this new Article 6A on horizontal principles. Point 2 refers to gender equality, and it calls for member states and the Commission to ensure that equality between women and men, gender mainstreaming, and the integration of the gender perspective are taken into account and promoted, again, through the preparation, the implementation, the monitoring, reporting, and evaluation of programs in all policy areas, in all priorities. As from for the previous programming period, there is no single thematic objective on gender equality. And when there are specific objectives of gender equality, the focus is very, very narrow to women's labor market participation and work-life balance provisions. So again, the overall or this overarching approach, gender mainstreaming approach, is not properly reflected then into the specific gender equality provisions. There are, of course, some provisions to make it operational, to make the principle, the gender equality horizontal principle, operational. Few provisions, but still there are some provisions, and being an enabling condition on gender equality may be the most relevant one. Yes, there is an enabling condition, which indeed I wanted to make a reference to ex-ante conditionalities, but maybe not. It's not the right moment. Maybe let's try to assess what's behind the thematic enabling condition on gender equality. Well, the first thing is that it's not binding for the 7 funds. Which are covered by the CPR. It's an enabling condition which is only relevant for the ESF Plus and for the ERDF. But again, only for 2 specific objectives of these 2 funds. Specifically for a specific objective for one of the ERDF, which looks at enhancing the effectiveness of labor market and access to quality employment. And when it comes to the ESF Plus, it's a binding condition for ESF Plus or specific objective 4.1.3, promoting women's labor market participation and better work-life balance, including access to childcare. So, I mean, it's a narrow enabling condition. And when we look beyond what this enabling condition asks member states to have in place as a prerequisite for funding, we see that it asks member states to have a national strategic framework for gender equality in place. But then there are specific requirements, and it mainly refers to a framework, a national framework, which covers or with objectives on policy, labor market participation, and work-life balance, which of course ask member states to have a monitoring and evaluation framework as part of this national framework. And it only asks member states to ensure that the national framework is in place indeed, as the name says, at national level. There are no references at all about regional level or even local level. And when it comes to the funds, we know that the real implementation then goes down the cascade. So no specific provisions on how gender is or gender equality frameworks at those levels. There are also some other provisions, other requirements on gender equality listed in the CPR. The first one, it's about the partnership principle. So it's about the definition of partners to be involved in programming and implementation of the funds. And there is again a specific reference to gender equality bodies to be involved in all the programming process and implementation process, monitoring as well. And then the last reference or provision to gender equality is about the selection of operations, and the regulation calls member states to establish and apply criteria which ensure that gender equality is taken into account, and the same, of course, or with the policy reference of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. If we look at the specific regulations per fund, it's important here to say that as for the ESF, for the ESF Plus, it includes a specific objective on gender equality. I mentioned it before: promotion of women's labor market participation and better work-life balance. And the okay, thank you. And the Article 6 of the ESF Plus regulation makes the dual approach to gender equality mandatory. For ESF programs. So within this framework, the key question here is how to operationalize the provisions into the reality of your work, into the reality of, I would say, not only managing authorities and intermediary bodies, and then applicants in call for proposals and so on, but also when it comes to commission as well, and the different DGs involvement in looking at the implementation of the gender equality provisions of the funds. So within this context, EIGE has prepared and published a toolkit on gender mainstreaming and gender budgeting for the next round of funds. It's a step-by-step guidance. It includes 11 practical tools, fully following the entire EU fund cycle. It's available in 22 EU languages, both in PDF format and also in an online format as well. And it covers, let's say, the regulatory framework, then the national and subnational programming and project level support, and finally the reporting, monitoring, and evaluation. If we look at, or if we consider research and innovation, and keeping, of course, the focus on these 5 main policy objectives, and specifically under Objective 1, the Smart EU, smart growth that Sandra mentioned and talked extensively about before in her previous presentation. How to go about it. The tool, EIGE's tool, for example, would start by considering a gender analysis of the different situation of women and men in one specific sub, or let's not say policy area, sub area, to then look at and try to propose a project which is gender responsive. So the first step of a gender analysis, we all know that it's to collect information, to have information disaggregated by different target groups, and then second step is to conduct a gender analysis. Let's say to identify the existing gender inequalities and the respective gender needs of women and men, and in all their diversity, responding to the groups. So the toolkit would, for example, present specific questions for the ERDF within the context that was previously explained. It will ask, or it will guide you then with questions that you can ask yourself to better mainstream gender into the elaboration of your own programs and proposals. It will, for example, suggest that you ask yourself when reviewing the proposal, what differences are there between women and men in information and communication technology? What differences are there between women and men in research and innovation capacities and the uptake of advanced technologies? What differences are there between women and men in skills and entrepreneurship? Or how might infrastructure and ICT solutions, for example, help to address care needs, build skills, and expand employment opportunities? Is there a need for a gender capacity development for program authorities, and by this link to the implementation of the funds, and so on and so on? So it will go on and go on, providing specific questions, guidance on for a gender analysis fully aligned with the policy framework of the funds overall, and specific per fund, per objective, policy objective, and specific objectives, thematic priorities, and so on, and investment priorities, and so on. But now I would like to switch a little bit. Let's do it more difficult now.
Vamos a hacerlo todavía más difícil. Bueno, vamos a saltar ahora a hablar de...
So this is the toolkit. Now you are seeing EIGE's website. Here you would select the language. The online version has 5 languages. The PDF version has been translated to 22 EU languages. So with a general introduction, and when we go to contents, here we see all the tools. And for example, now you are dealing with indicators. We are still under policy objective 1. We are still under Unsmarted Europe. Okay, and we know that there are core common output indicators and that there are core common results indicators. I mean, the framework of this toolkit is the CPR and the annexes to the CPR and the specific regulations of the funds. So within that framework, how can we capture gender equality, gender inequalities into the specific indicators? So we are not proposing, the toolkit is not proposing that you increase the number of indicators, which we know that it's even not feasible at all, but that you rather within the given and agreed common indicators that you also capture the gender aspect into it. So we would go into the tool 6, which of course it starts with a brief introduction of what the tool is about. Then it will jump into steps to develop to capture the quantitative and qualitative aspects of gender inequalities into the indicators. And then, for example, we go to the common indicators, to the tables, same common indicators as part of the annexes of the specific regulations. Okay. Policy objective 1, specific objective, enhancing research and innovation capacities and the uptake of the advanced technologies. There we have the common indicators for outputs and results, and questions for gender equality indicators and examples, proposals of specific indicators, or how to complement the common indicators at output level and results level from a gender equality perspective. So this is a practical example of how the tool would work. If or when it comes to criteria for call proposals, or project selection, criteria which is gender responsive and gender sensitive. Again, this toolkit will start by setting the scene, putting the focus in the CPR, in the regulations, and reminding managing authorities that they should establish criteria which is which takes into account gender equality, and provide specific guidance. And in this case, in the case of this tool, checklists to provide support managing authorities in this specific task. So we go to steps, and there, for example, so we have the steps, and then we see, okay, a checklist to guide the preparation of calls for project proposals. Okay, good. Step 1. And there we start with a checklist with questions for you to reflect gender equality, the horizontal principle of gender equality in this specific preparation of calls for project proposals. So then you have an example. So the different steps, sorry, the first one, it's generally about a reference to the horizontal principle as part of the project analysis. The second one looks at project objectives, step 2, and indicators. The third one, it looks at use of resources, planned use of resources. The fourth one looks and asks for gender competence, if our call for proposal it's including these aspects into its narrative, into its text or not. And the fifth step, we look at projects monitoring and evaluation, if our call for proposal is including any provisions on that. But this is for the call for proposals. We prepare our call for proposals, we have it ready, approved, we publish it. Okay, and then we start receiving the offers, the projects that are being submitted. Okay, selection criteria. Which part of it, of course, will already be included in the proposal, but also our own selection criteria, our own guidance to understand the selection criteria from a gender perspective. Again, another checklist: analysis, objectives, and indicators. So what we mentioned before, that will be described how to look at it, how to assess it from a gender equality perspective. This is a checklist for 2 activities and implementation: gender competence, monitoring, and evaluation. So this is the practical application or implementation of these general commissions, not commissions, because the regulations at the end are as a final result of the dialogue, the negotiations of the 3 key policy makers here: the Commission, the Council, the Member States, and the Parliament. So as a result of the negotiations, we had these general provisions we saw before, and the toolkit, which is not binding. And this, I should have started by saying that it's not binding. It's not official Commission's guidance at all. It's rather specific guidance and steps and tools that EIGE has put forward to support the implementation of these provisions on gender equality for the next round of funds. So this is the toolkit, and now let me, let me go back to the few slides I had. Okay, we are back in PowerPoint now. So I briefly introduce the practical guidance, 11 or part of the 11 tools. But then the tools, the toolkit is also based on good practices and examples coming from your member states. Examples of effective gender mainstreaming work, which could, and we know that serve also of inspiration for other member states then to boost their work on gender mainstreaming into
su trabajo de transversalización de género en los fondos europeos. Aquí tenemos un ejemplo que viene evidentemente de España. Hoy pensé que era importante darle visibilidad al trabajo realizado por España, sobre todo dentro del contexto del Fondo Social Europeo.
It also goes beyond, specifically because of also of the work of the National Network on Gender Equality in policies in the funds, which will be presented later on today. So in this example, we see it's a description of how steering operational program actions in a more gender equal direction. And it starts by acknowledging that Spain has conducted and implemented gender analysis. And as a result of this gender analysis, then specific measures have been included in some operational programs. And then also the involvement of gender equality bodies in the monitoring of these operational programs and so on has been considered. And finally, it also refers to the network, and then the work and the technical assistance that the network is offering and has been offering in the implementation of operational programs from a gender equality perspective. So this is a real example. If we think again about the toolkit and how to do something similar for 21-27 programming period, we already saw in EIGE's toolkit that it has a tool 2 on gender analysis. I went briefly through it before, but then there is another very, very important tool I want to mention here as the final one, which is defining partnership agreements and defining operational programs which are gender responsive. And when we talk about partnership agreements, this means operationalizing gender equality in policy objectives. And we talk about operational programs is more on specific objectives and measures, correct? So this tool offers practical guidance and also presents checklists and so on the implementation of horizontal period on a principle on those, considering the 5 key policy objectives and the specific objectives. So, okay, if we read, the specific the policy objectives, okay. First one, a smarter Europe, we already referred to, a greener Europe, a more connected Europe, a more social Europe, and a Europe closer to its citizens. Okay, it's true, or it might be true, that at first glance, for some of those objectives, making the links with gender equality sometimes it does not appear relevant. This is clear. But gender equality, it's very important for us to keep in mind that gender equality is part of our own lives, of every sphere, let's say, of life. And therefore, every objective it's impacted by gender inequalities and gender gaps in the specific policy area. So there is not such a thing as a gender neutral objective. This is the point I wanted to make here. So the toolkit will give you hints, again, practical guidance on how to do this, and the same when it comes to partnership principle and so on, which will be tool 5. So I will finalize here with this toolkit, just to remind that it's available on EIGE's website, and that you can choose and select your own language then to download it and to access the online versions or the PDF versions. So this is what we have just described are the gender equality provisions under the cohesion policy, under the ESF Plus and the ERDF mainly. But of course, the CPR, as previously mentioned, covers 8 funds. This toolkit, it's also relevant for not only all of them, but also then it includes tailor content based on specific regulations, for example, for the ERDF, for the ESF Plus, for the fisheries and maritime fund. On research and innovation policy, I would say that the path has been completely different. It's a different path. Gender institutionalizing, gender mainstreaming, it's also different. So maybe a couple of words on this. I wanted to mention that under research and innovation policy and then the investment funds, so Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe in the future, and within the broader scope of the European research area, there have been clearly identified 3 objectives on gender equality, which look at gender equal scientific career, let's say. The second one, it looks at women and men in decision making in this policy area, and the final one looks at the content of research. The focus in terms of how to implement then this on transformation, on structural change for gender equality in the policy area. So there was a focus also on specific actors, as I said, institutional change, transformation, and the tool, the gender mainstreaming tool that has been mainly used in the specific policy area of research and innovation are the gender equality plans. If we look at gender equality plans, again, the process, it's a process. The process started by introducing the concept and provisions behind a gender equality plan, to then move into finding specific projects that would develop this aspect further, providing guidance on an implementation, developing and implementing and monitoring a gender equality plans, tailored guidance. And now Horizon Europe is moving towards a new and completely different environment, which is making the gender equality plan as a requirement for finding. So it's Horizon Europe, it's already, let's say, into another step. When it comes to concrete examples and so on, some of you know that EIGE has a specific toolkit for this, looking at institutional transformation and gender equality plans that we are currently updating to make sure that it responds to the changes in the provisions of Horizon Europe. And when it comes to examples, for example, in the in the morning, we will have the presentation from Sardinia, and I think that it would really connect with this approach of transformative change towards gender mainstreaming and gender equality in research and innovation. So I will not go beyond and develop more in depth the references to Horizon 2020 and Europe, because the focus was the structural funds. And I think we have already given you a lot of information, and I myself, I'm looking forward to hear from you and to start an exchange with you. But before we move into that, I want to just present a final slide, which I will start by saying that COVID-19 and the crisis is already showing, has shown, and research evidence will soon be available, that the crisis is also gendered, and that gender gaps, mainly in the areas of employment and work-life balance, care work, gender gaps in these 2 areas are increasing. So, and this is a situation, we are facing a situation of stopping and slow but continuous progress in time. So the European Union was progressing until now in and slow, as I said, but it was closing gender gaps. The momentum has changed, the situation has changed, and we are at risk of increasing gender inequalities in the EU. So that's why it's so important that we increase our efforts in mainstreaming gender, and we make sure that the response to the crisis, that the RRF, the Recovery and Resilience Facility, is used in a gender responsive way. Otherwise, given the focus of the priorities, defining priorities, given the fact that the focus is on areas where male employment, for example, is predominant, before countries submit their national plans to the Commission, there is a risk of increasing gender gaps in the next 7 years of time. And this is something that no one wants to see. So I want to conclude by saying that that gender mainstreaming requires efforts, requires some enabling conditions like resources, of course, capacities, expertise, skills, and so on. But yes, so it requires some resources, willingness, political willingness, policy framework, but it brings back, benefits not only for individuals at individual level, but also for societies as a whole. So let's give it a try, and let's make sure that the next generation EU is it's more inclusive, it's more gender equal. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Elena. Thanks a lot for your wonderful presentation. It started with the general, the state of the art. It was not that positive with the study and how the situation is. I think we all have probably the same feeling, no? That it's kind of a flashback instead of going ahead with this situation. But we really thank you for providing us with the roadmap, as with this hope now that says, okay, this is the situation and this is where we are supposed to go. And AGA is working to support us at EU and national level, regional level, on capacity building on where to go. I have many questions, but along your presentation, you have been replying and answering to all of them. One of them was that it's like how this connection is to research and innovation. What are the priorities of the roadmap for research and innovation? And I think it was quite clear for that the priorities from your point of view is gender equality in research career, women and decision making, and structural change. So we are now in Spain, we're working that direction, but I think it was important in this connection with the structural funding and with this connection. We also were sharing some good practices that we will go through your toolkit to check what is some member states are doing in because one thing is to see it in the paper, another thing is to see that it's possible, no, it's feasible, and go there and check how other countries are doing it, because I think it's very important, not just from a practical point of view, checking if at national level or at regional level we can do something in our programming, in our implementation, in our, especially in our monitoring, how to mainstream gender. No, one thing that we might be
género. Y una cosa que nos preocupa es cómo reforzar desde nuestras instituciones, cómo podemos apoyar
or those that they are at regional and national level implementing programming this funding, no, these calls for how can we support them? Is first to raise awareness on how important the dual approach on gender equality is, and then secondly, how to make their life easily, because sometimes we can see that, no, for them it's more a burden rather than something easy to implement. Is there any advice? And that will be my only question before going to the coffee break, because I know you will be here with us, so we for sure will have more questions along the session today.
Mute. Thank you very much, Zulema. I think you have presented an excellent summary of the key messages and points I wanted to raise today in my presentation. So thank you for that. When it comes to partnership, to collaboration, and to reinforcement of this joint work between gender equality institutions and the specific agencies, research organizations, research finding organizations, universities, and so on and so on. I think that you have just, let's say, mentioned something critical and very, very important. The first thing from our perspective is that the gender equality bodies need resources. That's the first thing. They do need resources to properly support then the other institutions into their gender mainstreaming work, and the other way around. If we ask the other institutions to mainstream gender, they also need resources to do a proper job on that, because let's not us be naive here. Gender mainstreaming implies an effort, implies that resources need to be allocated, human and financial. Capacities need to be in place. So a process of capacity building, technical assistance, and so on needs to be foreseen. But it does not happen, I would say, if there is not a joint work, a joint collaboration between those actors that have the key responsibility, specifically in the policy area, in the subject, innovation, research, transport, and gender equality. So we strongly recommend, and we have seen it already as examples, as good examples and practices, the establishment of these networks, let's say, and support structures to properly implement gender mainstreaming. The example I just mentioned, the national example coming from Spain, the network on specific policies, gender equality policies in the structural funds. But maybe it's now the moment to remind that in, I think, 2 previous rounds of EU funds, structural funds, I think it was 2013. Now I have, no, it was 2007, 2013, and Maribel is somewhere there as well, who can correct me if I'm mistaken. It's 2014, 2013, no, I said it right before, 2007, 2013 before. Under the ESF, there was a specific network and a specific community of practices on gender mainstreaming, which was hosted in some member states. I don't remember now, but I think it was Sweden and some other member states were hosting this community of practices. And indeed, it offered practical assistance, a dialogue to boost the implementation of gender mainstreaming into the fund. So then in the current period of time, this network was discontinued. It came when it was international cooperation was defined and so on. There was no specific reference or priority on keeping something on gender mainstreaming alive, but still maybe it's time to consider it, to come back, to revisit good practices and examples, and see if something similar could be proposed. Because our understanding, feedback we are gathering from member states was that it was very, very useful. You have key participants with much more experience than me in this field attending the workshop today, including some of those were involved in the beginning of this network, and I kindly ask them to share this experience with you later on as well.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much, Elena. So if you all agree, we can go now for the coffee break. And if it's time for you, we are a bit short of time, but I think it's manageable, still manageable. We can go back at 11:15, and we will go start with the roundtable. Okay? Okay, so see you now. Thanks a lot.
Are really our way forward for structural change. Now this session is about COVID, and we also in our own DG did mobilized a lot of funding to mitigate the effects of the pandemic, especially also in the realm of the socioeconomic impact and the gender dimension. We have launched a second call of expression of interest, under which a lot of projects were funded to look into mental health, behavioral change, but also gender equality. And under this, there's 5 sister projects that actually look into more vulnerable populations and the impact of COVID. And one specific project, Resistory, looks into this from a gender plus framework, so inclusive gender equality with intersections of ethnicity, disability, age, and etc. And they will come up with new equality strategies on how to be also in the future prepared for potential, hopefully not future pandemics. We will also launch an expert group under Horizon Europe in the wider program on the effects of the pandemic on women researchers, productivity, and the number of publications. We already see in early studies that this has had a negative impact on women researchers. And maybe because the discussion before also looked at the Recovery and Resilience Facility, I can add that DG RTD has been consulted on the national recovery and resilience plans that have been submitted so far. And the gender sector has also been invited to look at the gender equality components in the R&I aspects of the national recovery plans. So in this way, we will also have a look at the gender mainstreaming in there. Thank you. And I look very much forward to the discussion. And if there are any questions, I will remain here till the end of the session. So happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jan, for providing us with this good news. We need this hope, not this of moving forward and seeing that all together and adding up and this progress towards mainstreaming gender equality. So thanks a lot, especially for the personally. I congratulate you all for this integration of the gender dimension as the eligible criteria. I think this is going to be a step forward to accelerate this dual approach, this integration in research and innovation. So now, without more delay, just you have the chat. I don't know if we have some technical issues for some of you, just to write down your questions in the chat. If that is the case, we will have a space at the end of the session for any question. Just raise your hand and we will give you the floor. Otherwise, just try. If the chat is, we are working the meanwhile on it. Because we didn't have that much time for Elena's questions for Elena, also for Silvia, and now for Jan. She will be with us for the whole session. Now, without more delay, this is the roundtable and debate on integrating gender in our funds, the funds we are talking about today, and also looking ahead in the future with this, as Jan was saying, how the pandemic is affecting us all and how this is connected, very importantly, not only to funds, but also to research and innovation. We have 4 speakers joining us today. Welcome and thank you all of you for having accepted our invitation to be here. We will start, the idea of this panel roundtable will be just each of them will have like 15, 20 minutes presentation, if it's briefly better, because then we have more time for questions at the end. And then we have the final part with some questions and answers. We will start with Elena Besukova. She is the Department of Open Management Operational Program Research, Development and Education in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport of the Czech Republic. Just a little bit words on their bio, the CV. Since 2014, Elena Beluchova has been working as an expert guarantor of the Department of Conception of Operational Programs and the auspice of the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports, especially dealing with financing, RT, and research organization in the Czech Republic. Within the current programming period, he was in charge of, for example, implementing a call of support activities leading to the HR award granting and pre-application research projects. And she's currently a member of the team preparing interventions for the future programming period 2021-2027. Elena will talk about gender in the operational programs of the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports. Thank you, Elena, for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for introduction. I'll just start presenting the presentation. Let's hope there won't be any technical issues. Can I guess you see again the notes? So I'll try to switch now. Okay, so as I was introduced, I'm representing Ministry of Education of the Czech Republic, and so far I have experience with 2 operational programs, 3, but I'll be talking about the 2 latest. I'll be talking about what step we took to move forward with gender topics, and what are going to be the following steps in the future programming period. So the present one, operational program, research, development, and education. I'll be talking about the R&D access, which is priority access 1 and 2. While priority access 1 is focused more on excellences of research, while the second priority access deals with human resources, and it should help and enhance research organizations and universities and our beneficiaries to improve conditions for research. At that time, in the text of operational program, there were just subtle hints of gender topics in those interventions. As you can see, we intervention in specific objective number 5, and the hint was cited as to support female researchers and to raise the interest in research at public and pupils, etc. So we were trying to deal with the gender topics, and we came up with the call development of R&D capacities 1 and 2. The first call was published in 2016 as a pilot project or pilot call, which was at first the environment accepted it quite skeptically, but at the end it was very successful, and we decided to repeat the call in 2019. We allocated in total approximately 50 million euro on those interventions, supporting 15 plus 31 projects in each call. And the tool we used how to enhance gender topics in those calls was, as it was already said, HR Excellency in Research Award. As I said, the turn was kind of spectacle at the beginning, and yeah, we were slightly worried how it will go, but it went very well. And we managed to include 35 institutions in total in those projects, in those calls. And so as far as I know, nowadays, we help to 20 research organizations to get the HR award granted so far. On the link at the slide, you can even see the list of the institutions that are already or have the award granted. The focus of the call was slightly wider than just HR award. There were activities, as you can see on the right side of the slide, like supporting technology transfer, popularization, evaluation of the research organizations themselves. But the emphasis was put on the HR award itself. I'm not sure how much familiar are you with the process. The base is implementation of two documents, which is European Charter for Researchers and the Code of Conduct for the recruitment of researchers, which are in like quick description, general principles and requirements that should be followed by employers when appointing or recruiting researchers. As well, the Charter sets principles which specifies the roles and responsibilities of researchers as well employers of researchers. So it sets or slightly changes the environment on research organizations. It sounds like there is nothing much to do with gender. We put more emphasis on the gender. I will show you on the following slide. But I have to say that incorporating this award into mentality of the research organizations in Czech Republic was first slight shift towards solving and dealing with the gender world in general. Here you can see the detailed supported activities where we already included that we want to strengthen the representation of women in R&D, and we wanted to incorporate measures to support the reintegration of researchers into R&D activities, especially after a time like a maternity or parental leave. The other activity was, of course, training and dissemination of knowledge. In real life, the real situation in the project is that the research organizations needed to include gender principles into their own internal and strategic documents. They were creating internal guidelines and processes with emphasis on gender equality. There were actualizations of their own ethical codes, etc. The other and probably bigger part of the project's activities was the education. It was an education just on general level, like again, to get the topic into researchers' heads, but as well, but unfortunately on a lower scale, the importance of including gender topics into the research itself. We wanted researchers to acknowledge that when they're providing the research, they need to sometimes include, when it's possible, gender topics as well. So this was the first step we made. Until now, the projects are still in the phase of implementations and they are getting results. But we decided to need to go much further with the new programming period. And we are facing new challenges as we are pushed and we want to push our research organizations to include more gender-related topics into the interventions. And I have to say that we are still in the phase of negotiation of the text of operational program. So those are like just first hints of gender topics we're going to include. We are sticking to HR award because we think it was good tool we used, and still we have plenty of research organizations without the award being granted. And it became quite, let's say, popular in the area. But of course, we need to include creation and implementation of gender equality plans as it will be required by programs in Horizon Europe. Then again, we put more emphasis on development of competences in the field of gender in the context of research itself, of course, together with development and innovations. And last, and I think most progressive intervention we're planning on doing is to support reconciling private and professional life and support the return of parents/researchers back to work to the research. Finance small projects, more research projects for parents again /researchers coming back to the research, going back to continue with their careers. And now I'll conclude it with the lesson we learned. We figured out that even with the hard times we had with representatives of research organizations, that HR reward is something they don't need, we figure out that it's really necessary to include specific interventions into the operational program. And we need to keep on pushing and to make the change happen. Another important thing is to include gender topics into the evaluation project itself. In Czech Republic, on our operational program for research and development, we're using foreign external evaluators. So that means we even struggle, unfortunately, to get enough evaluators for the projects. And it's even more difficult to look for the equilibration between female and male evaluators. But there are still a lot of projects that can do this. We as well are trying to select the evaluation criteria, thinking about the gender topics, and of course, including those topics into the text of the calls themselves. And as I was repeating through my presentation, those steps can be small, but they need to be persistent, because I feel like we're not all the way through still. But we're trying, we're starting, and let's hope we will manage to change the environment slightly, even though it's not easy, especially in R&D. But I believe, and my colleagues believe, that it's not impossible. So that's from my side. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Elena. Thanks a lot for this wonderful presentation, showing us what the reality is now and how you struggle. But at the end of the tunnel, there is hope, and there are outcomes, there are positive results, and congratulations because of your resilience and the opens of the doors of window of opportunity that you are advancing. So let's hope for the best for these next steps. And now I will give the floor to Isabel Castalví Carrascal. She's head of mainstreaming service of Women's Institute of the Ministry of Equality here in Spain. Isabel is a public officer working at the Women's Institute since 1985. She is the head of mainstreaming, in the area where she works. She promotes gender mainstreaming in public policies. She started working on European community programs and initiatives in the 1990s. Now, Integra Equal, there are some of the examples of the programming that she was dealing with. She's also the secretary of the Network of Equality Policies between Women and Men in the Community Funds. That's one of the reasons why she's here with us today. That's the main reason. So let me just... Isabel will talk about the network, especially on its network and equality policies between women and men in the community funds. And she will also show us a good practice from the specific field of fishery and aquaculture. After it, she will present the result of a questionnaire about the state of the art of gender mainstreaming in structural funds programming for research and innovation in Spain. This has been developed by the Network of Equality Policies and Women and Science Unit. It's a very recent good practice that we are promoting. We are initiating now in this advancement towards gender equality in EU funds, and has been distributed through the Research and Innovation Policy Network that is also here with us today. So thank you to all of you, both of the networks, for the support. And now, Maribel, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Zulema.
Thank you very much, Zulema.
Nos sentimos muy satisfechas, muy contentas de poder compartir esta mañana con todas vosotras, ¿no? Toda la experiencia, el aprendizaje, los conocimientos.
All the knowledge we have together amongst all of us.
Yo os quería, bueno, voy a compartir la pantalla, a ver si sé hacerlo. ¿Se ve?
Sí.
Yo os quería explicar la red de políticas de igualdad, pero antes de contaros qué es la red, me gustaría contaros de dónde viene, porque claro, somos fruto de toda una historia, de todo un aprendizaje, y que está ahí, ¿no? Y muchas veces parece que esto de la igualdad se hace con muy pocas cosas, ¿no? Con muy pocos recursos, con materiales y económicos y con muy pocos conocimientos. Y aprender de igualdad y saber implementar la igualdad en diferentes actuaciones requiere su tiempo y su experiencia, ¿no? Entonces, la red es fruto de toda una serie de personas, sobre todo mujeres, que durante años pues, han puesto toda su creatividad, su esfuerzo, su activismo y sobre todo no caer en el desánimo frente a las adversidades, como por ejemplo la crisis económica del 2008 o ahora la crisis producida por la pandemia, ¿no? Y seguir luchando porque la igualdad de género sea algo transversal en todas las políticas públicas, que eso es lo que pretendemos. Entonces, voy a contaros cómo nace esta red, ¿no? Esta red, el Instituto de la Mujer empezó a trabajar con fondos pues más o menos sobre los 80 y tantos, los 90. Empezó a trabajar con una iniciativa, no sé si alguna de vosotras os sonará, la iniciativa NOW. Era una iniciativa de la Unión Europea que estaba solo dirigida a mujeres. Y en ese momento el instituto gestionaba la iniciativa y además tenía proyectos propios en esa iniciativa. Fue todo un aprendizaje que nos enseñó a entender de fondos, porque claro, desde el ámbito de la igualdad, parece que tienes que saber de muchísimas cosas, entre ellas de la gestión de fondos, que es algo complicado, donde te tienes que meter y tienes que entender pues toda la chicha que hay detrás, ¿no? Y luego también ver las dificultades que podían tener proyectos que trabajaban en el ámbito del empleo o de la educación o de las infraestructuras para incorporar la igualdad de género, porque muchas veces decían, pero ¿eso qué tiene que ver con lo que yo estoy haciendo, ¿no? Bueno, trabajamos en la iniciativa NOW, que era solo específica de mujeres, ya os contaba, pero luego surgió otras iniciativas comunitarias y entonces había una que se llamaba Íntegra, que era dirigida a colectivos vulnerables o en situación de vulnerabilidad. Entonces el instituto presentó un programa que era un programa para mujeres, o sea, familias monomarentales. Entonces, ¿qué pasó? Pues que Europa nos dijo que no, que ya teníamos el NOW. Y nosotras dijimos, no, es que nosotras no queremos participar solo en el ámbito que es para mujeres, queremos participar en todos los ámbitos. Allí nos empeñamos en presentar un proyecto y al final conseguimos llevarlo a cabo, ¿no? Esa fue nuestra primera experiencia de transversalidad. No solamente estábamos haciendo programas dirigidos a mujeres, sino que en otros programas que estaban dirigidos, tenían otra temática diferente a solo mujeres, queríamos también intervenir e intervenimos en esa iniciativa. Luego vinieron los SQUAL. Con los SQUAL yo creo que tuvimos un aprendizaje muy, muy importante y nos permitió empezar a elaborar herramientas para incorporar la perspectiva de género en proyectos que no solamente eran en el empleo o la educación, sino que eran, pues, por ejemplo, en la inmigración o en la salud. Y ahí fue donde empezamos a formar lo que fue el embrión de lo que es ahora la red de políticas de igualdad. Se creó un grupo de trabajo en el periodo 2004-2007, en donde estaba Fondo Social Europeo, FEDER, la Comisión y el Instituto de la Mujer. Y allí fue donde empezamos a dar nuestros primeros pasos de cómo combinar dos políticas, la política de empleo o de educación que tiene la Comisión o las políticas de FEDER con las políticas de igualdad, porque las políticas de la Unión Europea no son líneas paralelas que no se juntan nunca, sino que tienen que confluir y, por ejemplo, la igualdad es un punto que tiene que ser común en todas las políticas europeas, porque si no, ¿qué bien estamos haciendo, ¿no? Si solamente nos ponemos el gorro del empleo o el gorro de la innovación y no tenemos en cuenta que detrás de cualquier política, aunque sean las políticas dirigidas a la creación de infraestructuras o mantenimiento de infraestructuras o la innovación y el I+D+I, están las personas, y las personas somos hombres y mujeres. Entonces, a partir de ahí empezamos a pensar en que ese grupo de trabajo tenía que tener otra dimensión, y fue cuando bueno, el marco estratégico nacional de referencia, el 2007-2013, que ya tenía incorporado que la igualdad tenía que ser un objetivo de los programas cofinanciados por fondos estructurales, y además se especificaba que tenía que ser mediante la transversalidad de género, y mediante acciones específicas, acciones positivas dirigidas a combatir discriminaciones de género que existían, ¿no? Entonces, es cuando ya ese grupo de trabajo se constituye en la red de políticas de igualdad, en lo que es ahora mismo, la red de políticas de igualdad entre mujeres y hombres en los fondos comunitarios. Fue creada en el 2009 y en ese momento estaba integrada por el Fondo Social Europeo, por FEDER y por el Instituto de la Mujer. Bueno, pues estuvimos trabajando, y los buenos resultados que dieron.
And thanks to the good output of our work, in the next program,
se le diera valor a las redes, no solamente a la red de políticas, sino, por ejemplo, a todas las que estuvieron funcionando, como la red de autoridades ambientales, y que se crearan unas nuevas. Se vio que las redes eran un estímulo, una forma de trabajar en grupos que permitía implementar la igualdad y bueno, el ámbito de intervención de cada red, implementarlo mejor en los fondos, ¿no? Entonces, se crea la red, y inicialmente ya os digo, por Fondo Social Europeo y FEDER, pero luego en el siguiente periodo de programación, en el siguiente periodo de programación, ya en el 14-20, en el acuerdo de asociación ya se preveía que intervinieran más fondos, y se le dio la cabida a FEDER, a Fondo Social Europeo, a la FEM y a FEADER. Entraron ya todos los fondos que en ese momento estaban funcionando en España, entraron en la red. Esto, ¿qué hizo? ¿Quiénes estaban? Pues estaban los organismos responsables de la gestión de los fondos, tanto a nivel estatal como de las comunidades autónomas, los organismos responsables de la igualdad de género, tanto a nivel estatal, el Instituto de la Mujer, como los organismos de igualdad de las comunidades autónomas. Estaban todas las redes temáticas que había en ese momento, y la Comisión Europea. En realidad estaba en esta red, están todos los organismos que promueven fondos, pero no solamente los organismos, o sea, las autoridades de gestión, sino también los organismos intermedios, los que ejecutan las actuaciones que están previstas en los fondos, y luego todos los organismos de igualdad y las redes temáticas, ¿no? De tal manera que consiguiéramos confluir la temática de cada fondo con las temáticas de igualdad. Pudiéramos encontrar esa sinergia de unir esas dos prioridades, ¿no? La que tuviera cada fondo, unida con la de la igualdad. ¿Qué redes son las que ahora mismo están funcionando? Pues la red I+D+I, la que ahora nos convoca a esta reunión, la red de iniciativas urbanas, la red de autoridades ambientales, la red de inclusión social, la red de economía baja en carbono, y la red de políticas de igualdad. Estas son las redes nacionales que funcionan, pero luego también hay otras redes en las que la red de políticas de igualdad incide, como es la red española de mujeres en el sector pesquero y la red rural. ¿Y qué es lo que nos permite todas estas redes? Pues la coordinación de las actuaciones, el análisis de la contribución de los fondos a los objetivos, a cada uno de los objetivos y al objetivo de igualdad, servir de intercambio de experiencias, porque desde la red y desde las otras redes trabajamos las unas con las otras para conseguir en cada tema específico de esa red implementar la igualdad de género, ¿no? ¿Qué es cómo se consigue? Bueno, pues el Instituto de la Mujer, Instituto de las Mujeres, que ahora hemos cambiado el nombre, trabaja con cada uno de los programas operativos plurirregionales de esos 4 fondos, y luego cada organismo de igualdad de cada comunidad autónoma trabaja con el programa operativo de esa región. De tal manera que vamos de lo general a lo más específico, a la concreción más específica que cada región, que cada comunidad autónoma y cada provincia, de qué manera implementa la política de cada fondo, más luego la política de igualdad. ¿Esto cómo se hace? Pues se hace por esa intersección de políticas, ¿no? La de los fondos comunitarios y las políticas de igualdad en esa red a través de la estrategia dual que antes ha estado explicando Elena, la transversalidad de género, o sea, la igualdad en todas las políticas públicas, en todas las actuaciones que se hacen desde los fondos comunitarios, y luego también a través de acciones positivas concretas, porque como decía Elena, para hacer un programa, antes hay que hacer un análisis de cuáles son las necesidades de infraestructura, las necesidades de innovación, las necesidades en el empleo, en la educación, de hombres y de mujeres. Y a partir de ahí diseñar el programa, ¿no? Bueno, y ahí está la red. Esta es la página de la red. Está ubicada en la web del Instituto de la Mujer. Y bueno, se trabaja el enfoque que tiene la red es mejorar, sobre todo mejorar la calidad de los resultados de todas las intervenciones cofinanciadas por fondos, porque nosotras tenemos la certeza de que si no se incorpora la perspectiva de género, los resultados no son los adecuados, porque solamente nos estaremos dirigiendo al 50% de la población y no conseguiremos ni mejorar la situación de desigualdad que existe, ni mejorar la calidad de nuestra sociedad, ¿no? Entonces, pensamos que incorporando la perspectiva de género se mejoran los resultados, y ahora os explicaré algún ejemplo de cómo eso se ha visto, ¿no? Se ha corroborado. Fomentamos un mayor conocimiento sobre cómo se incorpora la perspectiva de género con diferentes herramientas, como que ha estado. Tenemos herramientas que ayudan a cada fondo a incorporar la perspectiva de género, a cada fondo español, claro, viendo los programas operativos que tenemos en España. Que sea un referente clave, realizar vínculos, reforzar los vínculos existentes entre igualdad y los diferentes fondos, fortalecer la capacidad de actuación de los organismos de igualdad. Eso es muy importante, porque muchas veces hemos tenido la sensación de que por un lado iban los fondos y por otro los organismos de igualdad, y tenemos que sumar esfuerzos, conocimientos, estrategias, sumar para conseguir unos resultados más adecuados. Y luego poner en valor todo lo que se sale desde la red, ¿no? ¿Y eso cómo lo conseguimos? Pues con unas líneas de trabajo que van desde el asesoramiento técnico, desde el apoyo a los organismos gestores de fondos, la coordinación de los fondos con los organismos de igualdad, creación de grupos de trabajo que van cambiando según las necesidades de que se van detectando en la propia red, ¿no? En la propia red se va viendo que se necesita formar un grupo que estudie indicadores para el nuevo periodo o que estudie las brechas de género que tenemos que tener en la cabeza cuando nos ponemos a diseñar nuestros programas operativos. Desarrollo de metodologías y herramientas que nos ayuden a eso que está ahí, que hemos visibilizado en los grupos de trabajo, llevarlos a la práctica, capacitar y formar a gestores de fondos en igualdad y a organismos de igualdad en gestión de fondos, que es muy importante, y luego colaborar con todas las redes que hay. Estamos en los grupos de trabajo que tienen las diferentes redes, la red participa, ¿no? Hay un foro de organismos de igualdad que está en la red. Esto nos ha parecido muy importante, ha sido un salto cualitativo en el funcionamiento de la red. Ha sido un salto cualitativo porque nos ha permitido ponernos todo el mundo en la misma onda, ¿no? La gente que gestiona fondos tiene en la cabeza los
fine-tune, synchronize our work, and be on the same page. So we all have our own, we'll know information about requirements of the funds and whenever there is any.
La gestión lo que hacen es que la complican más. Y muchas veces te quedas en la gestión y no vas a ver los objetivos de eso que estás haciendo, ¿no? Entonces, nos ha permitido, pues bueno, que los organismos de igualdad tengan en la cabeza cómo se está gestionando los fondos y que sus objetivos de igualdad lo proyecten ahí, ¿no? Tiene recursos, en la red están los recursos por periodos de programación. Veis que está 2000-2006, 2007-2013, 2014-2020 y si pinchas ahí pues vas viendo las diferentes herramientas metodológicas y que se han ido produciendo en cada periodo según las necesidades que hemos ido teniendo, ¿no? Y luego la red funciona normalmente con grupos de trabajo, como os he contado, y también en reuniones plenarias en donde participan todos los fondos a nivel estatal y de comunidades autónomas y los organismos de igualdad, ¿no? Y ahí pues se ve un poco las líneas de trabajo, bueno, un poco los objetivos que se han alcanzado según el plan de trabajo que habíamos pensado para ese momento y luego los obstáculos, las dificultades y los retos que tenemos para el siguiente periodo. Normalmente se hacen 2 plenarios al año y luego los grupos de trabajo pues funcionan en función de las necesidades que tenemos, ¿no? que se van detectando. Una cosa que se me ha olvidado deciros, no sé por qué me he saltado la transparencia, es que en este periodo de programación el trabajo con los diferentes fondos, un hecho que nos ayudó mucho a que ese trabajo se llevara a cabo fue que la Comisión Europea para este periodo de programación dijo que una de las herramientas que se podían utilizar para la implementación de la igualdad de género era el dictamen de igualdad. Un dictamen de igualdad que tenían que firmar los organismos de igualdad correspondientes. O sea, los programas operativos, los fondos nos presentaban los borradores de los programas operativos de cada uno de los diferentes programas que tenía tanto Fondo Social Europeo como FEDER, como la FEN, como FEADER. Y en los organismos de igualdad, el Instituto de las Mujeres, en los pluriregionales y los organismos de igualdad de cada comunidad autónoma en los regionales, pues lo miraban y hacían pues sus observaciones. Si el dictamen era positivo, se firmaba por el organismo de igualdad competente y ese programa operativo se podía elevar a Bruselas. Y si no, tenía que hacerse las correcciones que se consideraran hasta que el dictamen pudiera ser positivo. Ese dictamen permitió que en cada programa operativo se incorporase la perspectiva de género de la mejor manera que pudimos, ¿no? De la mejor manera que pudimos. Y que durante todo este periodo de programación haya habido un seguimiento de esos programas operativos para ver si realmente se hacía lo que estaba previsto, ¿no? Bueno, otras de las herramientas, las herramientas de comunicación que tiene la red, pues para difundir su actuación y sus logros, pues son unos boletines trimestrales, un minuto para la igualdad que se lanza todos los jueves, que se difunde a todos los miembros de la red, no sé si puede haber 500 instituciones y personas en cada institución, de las instituciones que reciben el minuto. Noticias de interés y luego la web. La web en donde, bueno, todos los años tenemos bastantes visitas, ¿no? para consultar tanto las herramientas metodológicas como en los propios plenarios. En los plenarios, aparte de una puesta en común, hay una formación en un tema concreto y luego la presentación de buenas prácticas. Entonces, la verdad es que es un espacio en donde interesa entrar y visitarlo y comentarlo. Y una buena práctica, una de las buenas prácticas que os quería comentar es, las sinergias que se han establecido con la FEM, con el Fondo Europeo de Pesca Marítimo y de Pesca, ¿no? Cuando en este periodo de programación, en el 7-13, empezamos a trabajar con este fondo a través del dictamen de igualdad, pues nos dijeron que tenía que ver la igualdad con los armadores, con los pescadores, con los... todo era los, no tiene que ver nada con la igualdad. Entonces, ese trabajo de acercamiento a través de un programa operativo que ellos, un borrador que planteaban, nos permitió pues ir cambiando la realidad, la mirada que tenían desde ese fondo hacia la igualdad de mujeres y hombres, que parecía que era algo que no tenía nada que ver con ellos, ¿no? Entonces, una de las primeras cosas que surgió es, pero a ver, es que aquí no hay mujeres, no hay mujeres en este ámbito. Entonces, surgió este plan para la igualdad de género en el sector pesquero y acuícola, que surgió de un análisis de dónde estaban las mujeres en este sector, si había mujeres, dónde estaban, si había desigualdades o discriminación con respecto a los hombres y un poco qué medidas había que adoptar para poder modificarlo. A partir de ahí, pues bueno, el programa operativo empezó a cambiar porque de un ámbito en el que solo había hombres, se vio que en realidad también había mujeres, aunque no se las viera, y que tenían unas condiciones, unas desigualdades que había que afrontar en ese programa operativo, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, se hicieron los cambios fruto de ese plan, de ese diagnóstico que contenía el plan, y se firmó el dictamen de igualdad y se creó un grupo de trabajo para ir haciendo el seguimiento al programa operativo para ver pues si realmente se estaba incorporando la igualdad entre mujeres y hombres o no. En un principio, bueno, para ver si ese programa tenía que ver con la igualdad o no, pues se hicieron unos cuantos ítems para ver, que se le preguntaba a los proyectos para ver si realmente tenía que ver algo la igualdad entre mujeres y hombres con la temática que tocaban o no. Bueno, al principio no se entendía esos ítems, no sabían interpretarlos, salía pues como que solo un 1% o un 2% de los programas que contemplaba ese programa operativo tenían que ver con la igualdad y lo que pasa es que, bueno, pues a base de trabajar a través de grupo de trabajo que se creó en el marco del programa operativo y del desarrollo del propio plan de igualdad de género, pues ahora mismo, en la actualidad, se ha visto que el 18% de los proyectos que están enmarcados en la FEN tienen que ver con la igualdad de género. Tienen que ver, son los propios, las propias entidades que desarrollan estos proyectos los que reconocen pues eso, como la igualdad tiene que ver con lo que están haciendo. Pero no solamente se ha logrado eso, sino que se ha logrado visibilizar a las mujeres en este sector, a las mujeres, dónde están las mujeres en la pesca, qué necesidades tienen, y se han realizado pues desde conferencias internacionales sobre mujer y pesca, congresos, el último en el 19, en el 20 no pudo haber por la pandemia, congresos, pero se hacen cada 2 años. Se ha constituido la Red Internacional de Mujeres en el Sector Pesquero. Hay un protocolo general de actuación con África, ¿no? Con las mujeres de África, y se ha creado la primera asociación de mujeres en el sector pesquero, porque se vio que era muy difícil, claro, las mujeres en la pesca pues están como muy diseminadas, están las que están en Galicia, las que están en Cantabria, pero es como que no había conexión entre unas y otras, no podían poner objetivos comunes a reivindicar, y entonces la creación de esta asociación las ha empoderado, las ha visibilizado más y las ha hecho que tengan reivindicaciones comunes a exponer ante el Ministerio de Agricultura, Pesca y Alimentación y ante el propio Fondo de Pesca, ¿no? Entonces, para nosotras esta es una buena práctica porque nos ha hecho ver cómo bueno, el conocimiento, cuando tú, esto de la igualdad puede ser muy ajeno hasta que empiezas a conocerlo, a ver cómo puede, está también en tu ámbito, en el ámbito de la pesca, por ejemplo, está en tu ámbito y cómo puedes hacer para que las mujeres que están en el sector mejoren su situación y además los resultados que tú tienes con ese programa operativo mejoren porque realmente cubres el 100% de la población de ese sector, hombres y mujeres, ¿no?
Maribel,
bueno, pues,
Maribel, sorry for interrupting you. Is okay, just 5 more minutes? Just
Perdona por la interrupción, si no te importa tenemos que ir a...
5 minutos más, ¿te parece? Para dar espacio a los dos panelistas que tenemos después y luego las preguntas, porque nos queda media hora, 45 minutos.
Vale. Bueno, pues este forma de trabajo lo vamos a hacer extensible al siguiente periodo de programación. Y entonces, bueno, pues vamos a meternos en el sector que tenemos ahora entre manos, que es el del I+D+I, ¿no? Entonces, para saber cómo se está implementando la perspectiva de género en las políticas de I+D+I, lo que hemos hecho es hemos mandado un cuestionario para ver cómo se estaba incorporando, ¿no? Haciéndole a través de unas preguntas, pues ir viendo cómo se estaba llevando a cabo esta integración. Entonces han contestado 24 agencias o servicios financieros, 2 de ámbito estatal y 22 de comunidades autónomas. Bueno, aquí tenéis bueno, el gráfico de las respuestas que nos han ido dando, pero os lo voy a ir pasando más despacito porque creo que es lo más interesante, ¿no? Una de las cosas que le preguntábamos es si los proyectos que se presentaban tenían una puntuación adicional si la persona investigadora principal era mujer, si había un equilibrio de género en los equipos y si priorizaban el sexo de la persona investigadora principal en cada una de las áreas. Todas estas preguntas tienen una doble intención. Por un lado, que nosotras conozcamos cómo se está implementando la igualdad en los proyectos I+D+I, y luego también que cada entidad se pregunte, anda, ¿y esto no se nos había ocurrido o no lo estamos haciendo? O bueno, ¿qué tendríamos, en definitiva, qué tendríamos que hacer para poder llevarlo a cabo? También otra de las cosas que preguntábamos es si había la entidad que presentaba el proyecto tenía en marcha un plan de igualdad de género, si tenía un distintivo de igualdad, si integraba la perspectiva de género en el proyecto y se le daba una puntuación adicional, si contribuía de alguna manera al objetivo 5 de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, también se le preguntaba si lo había tenido en cuenta. Otra de las cosas que se le preguntaban era si en cada región, cada comunidad autónoma existían leyes, pactos, estrategias a nivel regional sobre igualdad de género o sobre ciencia y especialización inteligente, y si tenían planes de igualdad. También se les preguntaba. Otra de las cosas que se le preguntaba es si tenían protocolos, la entidad tenía protocolos sobre el acoso sexual o acoso por razón de sexo, si tenían estructuras de igualdad. Bueno, era toda una serie de preguntas, si tenían algún premio a la investigación, si tenían formación en ciencia, tecnología, si hacían algo en relación al 8 de marzo, por ejemplo, dirigido a visibilizar a las mujeres científicas, si participaban en proyectos europeos. Bueno, pues a partir de todo este cuestionario que nos han contestado, pues lo hemos analizado y vamos a crear un grupo de trabajo que estará constituido por la red I+D+I, por la unidad de Mujeres y Ciencia, por alguna comunidad autónoma, por la red de políticas de igualdad. Y eso nos permitirá empezar a trabajar para hacer ver que las mujeres tienen que estar en la ciencia y además que la ciencia tiene sesgos de género y hay que luchar contra ellos. Porque la igualdad de género está desde el principio, desde el primer tratado de constitución de la Unión Europea, está la igualdad de género, ¿no? Aunque solo en el Tratado de Roma solamente se nombra como igualdad retributiva. Pero la igualdad de género desde la Constitución de la Comisión Europea, de la Comunidad Europea, es un principio, es un valor y es un objetivo. Lo que pasa es que, como decía antes Elena, cada vez está más desdibujado. Nosotras al principio, en los años 90, siempre decíamos, lo dice Europa, para implementar programas aquí en España. Ahora, realmente, yo creo que tenemos que estar tirando de Europa porque Europa cada vez desdibuja más la igualdad, ¿no? Y prueba de ello, pues, bueno, esta foto, ¿no? Esta foto que todas reconoceremos, en donde se ve el grado de igualdad que tenemos las mujeres en Europa, no solamente las mujeres de la calle como pudiéramos ser nosotras, sino la propia representante de la comisión, ¿no? la directora. Entonces creo que tenemos que construir un futuro diferente, en el que la igualdad de género sea una realidad, una realidad, porque realmente si incorporamos la igualdad de género en nuestros proyectos, estaremos construyendo esa Europa social que muchas veces presumimos de ella, ¿no? De esos valores distintos que tiene la Europa social en la que nosotros vivimos. Bueno, muchas gracias por vuestra atención y quedo a disposición de las preguntas que...
If you have any questions, I will be more than glad to answer them if you want me. Okay, thank you so much, Isabel, for your presentation. I think that is a very exciting topic, and I think that we need to share much more in Europe. You're one of the highest experts that we have, so I think it's plausible, and she has explained us how, and how is very important along the years to crystallize in a network of equal opportunities and giving clear results, and the reason why it is so important to continue working. It might be, but the interpreter is working through the English channel. Yeah. So, okay. So, Okay, I'm really excited about the presentation that Isabel just gave. So we need to add before, and we all need to be in the same mindset. It's very
Ha explicado ella cómo, bueno, pues estaba en su presentación.
how she explained it all through her presentation. Thank you, Maribel, for your presentation. And without further ado,
for his presentation. Antonio is a public officer at the Regional Programming Center from the Autonomous Region of Sardinia in Italy. He is graduated in political science with a master in European project planning and management, and he's a member of European Cooperation Working Group inside the Regional Department for Planning, ROP ERDF, Managing Authority of Sardinian Region. Antonio has been working for more than 10 years as Project Financial and Communication Manager for EU co-funded projects like Europe8, ENI, CBC Med, Interreg, and Horizon 2020. Antonio today brings the experience of integration of gender in the European Regional Development Funds program in the autonomous region of Sardinia in Italy. Thanks to the development of the Gender Equality Plan in the framework of the Supera project, where we are together. It's a pleasure to be here or to share this Supera project with him. Antonio, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and for sharing your expertise and your experience today with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Zulema, for inviting me and inviting RAS Supera team, because I'm here as a part of a team that is working not only in a Supera project, but also in integrating GEP in ERDF. Now I try to share my, just a second. Okay. As we are still working on our new ERDF program, my presentation will be focused mainly, just a second. Okay, sorry. We will focus mainly on our methodology and approach. I must say that it's been really inspiring, the previous presentation, and we are happy to see that our methodology maybe is the same of our colleagues in Spain, but now we are still working in order to achieve the same results, and we hopefully will reach this result in this program period 21-27. I'd like to start the presentation with our results, with our experience in Supera project. There are two reasons for this choice. The first one, the methodology we used with Supera, that it's the same we are using as a equality opportunity team for the next ERDF program. And then the results. The results we reached with Supera are the basis of our work for the next programming period. So let's speaking in a glance about Supera. We decided to participate to draft a gender equality plan for some criticity in the research innovation situation for women. For example, the low number of women, the low percentage of women participating in research innovation projects compared with the men. And about the criticity in our law, regional law number 7 for research and innovation. This law is really important. It funds scientific culture, human capital, integration between basic and applied research. But in this law, in the whole call for proposal, there's no any reference to gender, or to better saying, now there is a reference to gender, and thanks by Supera results. In which way we decided to work? We understood that we considered that it was difficult to write a gender equality plan with a larger basis of consensus without working outside the regional administration. We can't work alone. We work it, in fact, with the whole regional administration, and also trying to find some alliance also outside our offices in Sardinian region. And these alliances were built also at the political level. and with a bottom-up approach involving our local stakeholders. Let's see, in fact, the side of political alliances. Supera principles were introduced in our regional development plan. What does it mean? The RDP, Regional Development Plan, is the most important programming document of our region. It's a political document drawn up by the Sardinian government, the new Sardinian government, for the period 2024. So it is valid for the entire legislature of the new Sardinian regional government. What does it mean? It means that all the other programming documents of Sardinia must be written in compliance with the regional development plan. And so I introduce here the quote of the ERDP speaking about Supera. Every programming document must ensure compliance with gender equality, also thanks to the Supera project. So it's a really important political result for us. And then, speaking about the bottom-up approach, we write the JEP thanks also to our local stakeholder alliance, our local stakeholder, universities, associations, citizens gave us advice and useful indication for write our JEP. Our JEP was approved last year in July. So this is the basis of our work in Supera, and now we have the other main goal, maybe the most difficult one, the long way for ERDF 2021-2027. But we are starting with the results we obtained with Supera. First of all, the participatory approach that we are bringing with us also in this new programming period. And secondly, with the political approval I have mentioned before. So I was speaking about political approval. All the preparatory documents of the ERDF 21-37 mention our work in Supera. For example, the regional strategy for sustainable development speak about Supera, speak about our JEP, gender equality plan. And also the most important in order to prepare the ERDF for Sardinia 21-27 speaks about Supera project and speak about Supera as a good practice, and it is really important for our future work. This document is the context analysis for the definition of a strategy for ERDF 21-27. And now I speak about the political approach. Let's speak again about our bottom-up approach. In order to write an ERDF useful and close for the citizen needs, our ERDF managing authority organized a series of thematic workshops on different PO topics, policy objective topics of the program. The first one was about our topic, the cross-cutting principle of equal opportunities. And in the large set of equal opportunities, obviously is included also the gender equality. Around 400 people interested in equal opportunities participated and gave us suggestions and advice in order to integrate gender equality in the new programming, in the new program. And much more interesting, a presentation was dedicated to the Supera project best practice. But according to the fact that equal opportunities is a cross-cutting principle, each PO, so in any single thematic workshop, the topic of equal opportunity and gender equality has been mentioned. And so for us, there is a big challenge. So to integrate for any single PO, the gender equality thematic. How we decide to work, we create in order to better afford this challenge, we create a working group for equal opportunities inside the ERDF managing. Oh, sorry. Okay. We create a working group for equal opportunities inside the ERDF managing authorities. This group, and the group is present here with me, is coordinated by Simona, who is also working on Supera project, and includes obviously the Supera working group with our experience, the responsible for any single PO for 21-27, and our internal evaluation team. Now, let's speak about our objectives. And I must say that it's been a really inspiring the presentation of the woman before me. Our objective is starting by the suggestions and of our stakeholders, write the new ERDF documents, finding solutions for include gender equality in each PO. Examples of our way of work could be, for example, underline to extend the principle of the JEP also to private companies, or another road that we are trying to practice is about linking some funds to gender equality action. I want to underline that it's a work in progress. We have a good team group, but probably it's the first time in Sardinia we are starting to think in this way, and so we are really confident to reach a good results. But of course, it's of course there are a lot of things to do and work to do. But we can just speaking about some lesson that we learn in this period with Supera project and with the ERDF new program. Always be inclusive at any level. We need the approval at the highest level, the political level, but also the approval of our citizens, of our local stakeholders. Then thinking in terms of equal opportunities, thinking in terms of gender equality in any situation. We are speaking about a cross-cutting principle, so any thematic must be in compliance with gender equality. And then the importance of the team. This team were born with Supera, but is interdisciplinary and committed not only on gender issues, but also to other thematics. And the results is a way of thinking out of the box, and they bring of different experience. And so it's easiest to have an inclusive contribution for the different POs. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm here at your disposal for any question.
Thanks to you, Antonio, for this wonderful presentation and showing congratulations for the work done so far, and the best of the luck for the work ahead. I think it's a very, very good example on how to integrate equal opportunities and gender equality in this European Regional Development Funds from this dual approach that Elena was mentioning before. No, that is, the commitment is clear, and also I think it's a very good example. No, this specific working group to make sure that in each one of the thematic areas of this funding is going to be. And let me replicate one of your answer or your sentences. It's so important to think out of the box. So I was taking note of that one because it's also very inspiring. Thank you so much, Antonio.
You're welcome.
Now,
thank you.
I will give the floor to our last panelist. Her name is Caroline Meyers, and she's expert in transnational cooperation and knowledge management. Is working in SNF and Sustainable Business Department in Belgium. Just a brief paragraph on her bio. Caroline started her career at KU Leuven as a researcher on municipal cooperation. In 1996, she switched to the Ministry of the Flemish Community to strengthen the European Social Fund. First, mainly concerned with long-term job seekers and target group policy, but afterwards she also addressed other themes such as career policy, poverty, social innovation, and gender. Caroline is currently mainly engaged in transnational activities within European Social Fund Flanders, and she is the chair of the European Community of Practice on Employment. She also works on the topic of gender and gender mainstreaming in European Social Fund Flanders. She has been doing so for more than 20 years now. Caroline brings us ideas about gender mainstreaming based on the experience of the Flemish Managing Authority with the European Social Funds. Thank you, Caroline, for accepting our invitation to be here, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. I will try to be brief because I see that the time is running fast, especially when you have to listen to all these very inspiring presentations. I will try to share my screen. Okay. So let's go to the first slide, of course. I hope that everybody can now see my presentation. Okay, thank you. Why is gender and gender mainstreaming important in ESF? Well, first of all, it's for us. Oh, I have to go back. I'm a little bit too fast. It's for us, ESF is a key structural fund for establishing gender equality in the labor market. So I'm not going to speak for the other sectors, but especially for the labor market, European Social Fund is the fund to establish gender equality also for the other managing authorities. And we, as Flemish Managing Authority, we are in charge of implementing the ESF in Flanders, and we attach a lot of importance to gender for years. Because, I mean, as you told, I'm already working for 20 years on gender and gender equality in Flanders. And why is it important is because to achieve this, because everybody can say, yeah, why should we focus on gender also in these funds? But we rely on the ethical, the legal and economic motives. So the ethical, it's equal opportunities and no discrimination is one of the cornerstones of the Western culture, and also is based in human rights, and also one of the SDGs is now of the UN is focusing on equal opportunities and on gender equality, but also legally. So it's in the legislation, in European and Belgian legislation, but also in the regulations of ESF, which is for us a big plus. And there are also a strong economic motives to put the focus on gender. It's because we see also in innovation that the mixed teams are doing much better in the enterprises, but we also see that the best organizations or the best enterprises have a strong focus on gender and gender equality. So, okay, now I have to go to the other. Okay, so what did ESF Flanders do is that we wanted, well, we did a lot. In those 20 years or 21 years that I'm working on gender, we did a lot. But then we saw that a lot of the actions we took were ad hoc. So, or when new organizations or new colleagues were coming in, that a lot of the information and the knowledge was lost. So that's why we decided to draw up a strategy and an action plan, so that my colleague and I, who are working on gender mainstreaming, that is so. And when we would be in a plane and it crashes, or when we would die suddenly, that at least what we are doing is taken on board to all the other colleagues. So what is our goal is a change of behavior so that gender and gender mainstreaming becomes something normal and automatic in the organization. So that is our aim. And so what did we do? We made an inspirational document out of it. So if people are interested, we can always send it in the coming weeks. But what was our process that we worked on for a couple of years now is, first of all, we looked for support for our gender project internally, but also externally. So first of all, we made sure that the senior management and the middle management were on board and that they agreed that within the organization, we would work on gender and gender mainstreaming. Because what do we see is that even if you want to work on gender, is that a lot of your colleagues don't know what we mean. What if a project wants to work on gender? So the most common answer that we receive on our projects promote is that, well, our project is open for men and women. And then we were thinking, but that's not gender or gender mainstreaming. So, but also our colleagues were afraid because they didn't feel comfortable, because even they didn't know what we meant when we were talking about gender mainstreaming. So we have to have a base internally, and then we can also do the external work. So we also talked to our stakeholders, which were working in the monitoring committee, and said, this is what we want to do. So are you please on board with what we want to do, and what are your needs? But also to the project promoters, we did a survey and we asked them, what are your needs? If we are talking about gender and gender mainstreaming, what do you need from us to make sure that the gender is on board in your organization, but also in your project? So then when we started, when we had the support, we started working on a strategy. And first of all, we found it very important that we, as managing authority, should walk the talk. So if we would not say that gender and inside our division, gender is not important, then our stakeholders and our project promoters would not take gender seriously. So that's why we said, okay, we're going to develop that strategy and draw up a specific action plan. And so to make sure that we provide the appropriate support to different service entities, but also to set up a permanent evaluation of the strategy, so to make sure that what we are doing is actually working. And what is our strategy built on? It's built on 4 pillars. And we call it AMOR and ROMA. Now, why do we call it AMOR and ROMA? It's AMOR is because it's the heart, it's culture. And Roma, as you know, in Rome, the Romans, they built very solid and sustainable buildings. That's the structure. And we always say, you don't get a good gender culture without providing some tools. But the other way around is true as well. If you can provide the tools and the instruments that people need, but there is no culture to work on gender, nothing will help either. So that's what are those 4 words? What this AIM stands for? It's attention. So make sure that keep gender always on the top of the mind of everyone. Is the motivation, so to make sure that we appreciate what colleagues and promoters are doing. We offering support to provide so the tools, the necessary tools to our colleagues and to the promoters, but we also want to have the reflex. So to send reminders always, ever again, that what we are doing has to have the gender focus. So that was the second step. And then we started to implement our action plan, combining the analysis of the needs and the strategies in our action plan, offering so the cultural and the structural support. Now we, so always with those 4 pillars in mind, with the attention, the motivation, offering support, and the reflex. Of course, we can't do everything at once because it's a long process, especially if you want to go for a behavioral change, it's a long process. So, and we see that we will repeat the cycle as long as it's necessary. So, but what are some examples of possible actions is making gender in so that it's a topic in all the course, but pay attention to sensitive language. But maybe one of the things that's very interesting to mention is we designated ambassadors. So in our division of ESF, as ESF Managing Authority, we have designated, I think more or less 6 gender ambassadors who, when there are calls in communication or in when we are developing our website or whatever, that they always try to also say to the others, don't forget the gender focus, so that gender is everywhere. So this is what we are trying to do at this moment. And it's working. We're taking very slow steps, but nevertheless, it's working. And so, how are we going to introduce this in the new ESF program? And keeping in mind that indeed the gender segregation because of COVID-19 is a major issue and is becoming more and more visible as well. So we want to make sure that we focus on gender there where we have the most impact. So the impact, and that's why we need this ongoing evaluation. So we have to see that where the need is the strongest, that there we will start our priorities. So I have to say that when looking at the new ESF program, that we see that thanks to the European Commission, gender and gender equality remains important. And that's one of the main reasons why we receive also the support that
We've lost her, haven't we? Yeah. Let's give her some minutes in case he's back. Okay, in the meanwhile, while Caroline tried to reconnect, I guess Virginia was asking us if we will share the presentation with all participants. I guess so. I guess we will ask all of them for the permission. I will share the presentations with you all. And if there's any question we can take in the meanwhile for any of the... Caroline, you're back.
So I lost my connection, so I am just going to my last
She's traveling. I think she just lost her connection again, right? Okay. So I was asking in the meanwhile if you have any question, please in the chat or raise your hand and
Yes,
let us know.
Chair.
So these are some things that we were doing. So the inspirational document for other organizations, so an advisory board, and we will work out the capacity building as well. So these are more or less, I will stop here before I drop out again. So I'm sorry that it was with some, but this is more or less what we are doing in Flanders. And if there are some more questions, please don't hesitate to ask them.
Thank you so much, Caroline. It was great to see how you are doing the lesson learned and how inspirational it is as well, no? To do in practice, to see in practice step by step this long run, as you were saying. On my side, I will take two of your key elements, and one of them is motivation. How important is to keep those that they are executing, that they're in the first line implementing, to keep them motivated, to remind them that gender equality is everywhere. I love that word. Gender equality is everywhere. Just they need to open their eyes and to see it. And this top-down and down strategy that I think is key. If the message is coming from top to down to the bottom, and then those that they are under, no, that we are at regional level, national level, we are asking, especially from gender equality bodies, no, we are asking for this to be integrated. I think is really important. Thanks a lot, Caroline. So now the floor is for participants. Anyone that is asking, want to ask something, please go ahead. We will love to just place your questions to all the wonderful speakers and panelists we have been having. Maribel, ¿tú tienes una pregunta? No? Ok, no veo ninguna pregunta, no tenemos en el chat. Bueno, pues...
I don't see any questions on the chat either. So if you will agree, and by means of conclusions,
to conclude the wonderful mutual learning workshop, in my opinion, we have been having today. I think we met all our aims, as Marcela was mentioning at the beginning, all the targets of the objectives of this workshop, they were all covered. We have this overview that for us was very important on understanding how the structural funds are working. There was, thanks to Silvia Albert to show in the cell. Then Elena was showing how important is to mainstream gender equality into all this funding, and especially to provide us with some tools, no, that is giving us the way and the roadmap to do so. And last but not least, to see some practicality, some examples from Czech Republic, from Spain, from Italy, and from Belgium, and what might be some experiences and some ways to integrate it according to the reality of our different countries. But I think that is very important, especially for giving us some fresh air, no, some motivation, as Caroline was saying, to keep on going, because we all know that integrating mainstreaming gender equality in our case, where we are, where in the Women and Science units we are here, and this is the framework of this Gender Action project and this mutual learning workshop. In research and innovation, this is a key element, and we are aware how important it is to keep on going and of raising awareness, and that gender equality is everywhere. Gender equality needs to be mainstream in each of these thematic areas, and research and innovation in each one of the topics we are dealing with, and the way to do so. And for that, capacity building is really important, and working together is a key element, and that's one of the things that we are strongly committed here in the Women and Science Unit and Gender Action projects. And I know that this mutual learning workshop and the participation of you all is a real example of how important it is for us all to go ahead in this long run project that is to mainstream gender equality in everything that we are doing is a key element. So thank once more to all of you participating today, speakers, my colleagues organizing gender action project, and the interpreters for this wonderful morning. And I hope it's been so fruitful for you as has been for me. And let's keep on going. Thank you so much. I wish you all a very nice evening, very nice week. Okay?